Begin. Okay. Can you hear me out there? No?
Caesar, try again, Caesar.
Testing.
Okay,
Can you
testing.
yell? Just
Everyone test their mics. Testing one. Harvey,
Testing 2.
Will.
Test.
Power's on.
Testing.
Can you hear me?
Mine. For sure.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. I'll lean into the mic. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Appreciate you being here. And tonight we're really going to just start doing some blue sky thinking, as well as hopefully narrow it down a little bit about what the commission would like to see as far as our goals and strategic plans going forward. I've outlined just a few very broad topics, such as fiscal sustainability, public safety goals, that sort of thing, and we'll be discussing that tonight with the commissioners. So with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor and get going here.
Thank you. If I screech too much, hopefully Caesar will fix that. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're glad that some of you could come out this evening. The way this is kind of structured is pretty open-ended. It's a workshop, so we'll kind of leave it section by section, get the commissioners' inputs. This is really a broad stroke of what we're going to do, not how we're going to do it. So it's the priorities as the commission, as they talk to the public, gotten input. Of course, you're here this evening to also give us input regarding what some of those goals are. As we're moving into budget season, I know we're still kind of fiscally trying to figure out where we are. We have one more CAFR to go, and hopefully we'll have a much better understanding at that point within a few months where we are. So today is broad strokes. If you would like to speak, I'm not sure how we should handle this, so I'm going to kind of talk to the commissioners and ask how they would like to handle it as a group, rather than one person deciding. There are topics that you have identified on the worksheet that we can start with, which is setting. Does everybody have a copy of this in the audience? Yay? Okay. There's kind of two sections. One is setting near-term goals, which is the 2017-18 priorities, which is our upcoming fiscal year as we move into budget season. But impacting that are some of the long-term goals, which are the 3 to 5 year pieces of capital improvements and infrastructure improvements, so that as you're moving forward, you may need to phase these in and look down the line as where we're going to go. So there's kind of two sections here, and that's how it's broken out. Just want to check with commissioners. Are we okay with using the agenda as we have it currently set?
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
Any problem with that?
No.
Commissioner Ross?
I think we should call the roll for the recording so everyone knows who's here.
Oh, that'd be a good thing. So, sorry. Call the roll, call to order, and we'll call the roll. It is now, sorry, we started about 6:32. Go ahead and roll call.
Mayor Trumpman,
Here.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella,
Here.
Commissioner Bill,
Here.
Commissioner Roth, here, Commissioner Tudor.
Here.
Okay, we've already kind of done the overview, so I guess we can move directly, unless commissioners have any objection, we'll go ahead and move to identifying and setting near-term priorities. Okay.
Can I offer a suggestion? I brought in a board and some markers, thinking that as we went through our discussion, we could direct the clerk, or maybe someone in the audience would help us put down bullet points that anyone raises. And then at the conclusion of the discussion, the way that I've seen it done before, and we've done it in other plans with the commission, is everyone gets some of these dots. And say if we come up with 20 ideas, they can't all be priorities, but depending on the support it gets from each commissioner putting dots on those bullet points, those will be like move up in priority.
We could do the dots, or we can just have a consensus as we move forward. It's up to everybody. I have no problem doing it formally.
I think some of the things actually depend on where we stand monetarily. Some things we'll be able to afford sooner than later, and other things will, yeah, it's a great idea, but it may take longer to do it.
And I think also one of
But
the
whatever, that would be all right with me too. So,
one of the challenges, I think, will be in that we don't know how much money we have. We are still trying to identify reserves and where we are. So even though tonight we're going to be doing broad strokes of where we are, we may decide tonight we want to move forward with something, and then we may find out later as we move into budget season, we may or may not have the funding for that. So I think part of the issue may be categorizing them as opposed to how many agree that we should move forward with it, categorizing it whether it's an immediate need, whether it's a wish list, and kind of breaking things out to me as to what's the have-tos and what's the want-tos. I think that's kind of
Right.
key. And
So we have 3 different color dots, and we could designate them as a
fine.
priority and then a wish list.
I think that's a great way, actually, for
It's fine.
the
Visual.
audience to be able to
See it and
It's
follow
a
it.
visual.
as well, so.
Do we have any volunteers who want to, because I know you have to
Play
take
with
notes.
stickers.
Anybody wants to stand up and, no volunteers.
Teacher, anybody?
Or invite, do you want to write, Mac? 2?
Okay.
Fantastic, thank you, Mac.
I think, Christian, the one thing we do have a priority on is our CIT funds.
Okay.
Don't we have to have that, we have to spend it? And I'm not sure what our, how soon we have to spend it.
And I will have to check on that, because I know we didn't spend any so
Yeah.
far this year from that. But we are undergoing the 5-year audit for CITT right now.
Yeah.
And I will get those details.
Yeah, I had spoken to Beatrice a month or 2 ago, and she had mentioned that we had about $400,000, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And the thought was, she had spoken to the county, and either we spend it or we lose it, lose parts of it. So we need to do some, or at least have a plan in place for what we're going to be doing with it.
Let's be clear, that do
Yeah,
you,
but part of this, in undergoing this audit, what we found is that there are expenses that the village incurs, such as lighting, that sort of thing, which come out of CITT.
Okay.
They have not been transferred out of the CITT fund into the general fund. So as we go through the audit and identify specifically what we have in there, we'll start moving that to the general fund and vice versa, as needed to get that account. We've got $400,000 plus sitting in the account right now, but it may not be like that once we
Yeah.
get through this audit. And so
Is-
that's one of the things, they don't want to spend money that we're gonna,
Right,
we
That
don't
won't be
really
there.
have.
Is 20% of that has to be used for transportation, or is it can all be used, I mean, for roads, not actually physically, like a bus?
Some of it can be used for transportation, like bus stops, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Other parts of it has to be used specifically for roads.
just for the sake of the audience, we do have specific funds that we get from other sources, and those have to be designated and used in specific ways, and the CITT funds are oftentimes used for transportation type things, just to be clear. Commissioner Ross.
So just to further clarify on the CITT, we did have somewhere around 400,000, or maybe up to 500,000 now. 20% of that fund must be used on a transit-related project. 80% is used for transportation in general, which includes roads. So in the last budget, we set out for the CITT fund to set up a bus shelter and bench at the bus station by Village Hall. To my knowledge, we haven't done anything in that direction, but that's 20% of money that we can't use for street lights or to improve roads or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, that's, I thought it was something like that, I didn't know. But it was-
So, yeah, so to go through, so we don't jump around too much, and to be fair to everybody in the audience, is it okay with everybody to start down that list and go ahead and do that?
Yeah,
And you do have to leave,
I'm going to have to leave during the meeting, yes.
Commissioner Bill won't be able to stay for the entire meeting, so what we may do to accommodate him is have him, before he leaves, give us anything else on the list
Good.
so that we can deal with that. Okay, for starting off with, the first one is fiscal sustainability. And perhaps what we could do, if it's okay with the commissioners as well, I know it's our priority list, but also have the village manager talk about his priorities as well, so that we're all on the same page in terms of where we need to go, and his insight as well. If it's okay, we'll just start with village manager. Would you care to talk about fiscal sustainability in your perspective?
Sure. I've sort of broken it down to personnel in place. That's part of the whole fiscal responsibility or sustainability issue. We have a new finance manager in place. It appears she's doing a great job as far as cleanup and getting organized, helping us through the first CAFR, getting us ready for the second. And so that is moving forward and continuing, and hopefully that will be something stable that we'll have her here for the next few years at least. that, I think, will go further than anything else, just in getting us cleaned up and straightened out and moving forward on a strong foundation. Additionally, we're trying to put systems in place for things like invoicing, collection of citations and fines, and that sort of thing. Bulk trash, we pick up the bulk piles. They haven't been billed to the residents yet, and so there's a stack of those that have to go out, and these are all things that we are catching up on. It's just taking some time. And so these are all things that we're trying to get into place now, and we want to set up really systems so that this isn't reliant strictly on one person. That these are systems that, should I get hit by a bus tomorrow, they're going to carry on and keep going. And that's what we really want, because the changeover in personnel that we've had the past few years has set us back on these. It sort of gets halfway done, and then the personnel changes, and it drops and winds up in a stack or a box or something like that, that we're now digging through and getting.
And you had also mentioned in some of the meetings, just so everybody's aware, that manuals, the old school, you had a manual when somebody leaves or somebody's sick, somebody can walk in and say, okay, I don't know how to do that, but if I turn to page 26, it'll actually be there. And I know some of the audience members had also recommended that. And I know you had talked about putting that in place, so at least whether it's an electronic version or a hard copy, either way, there's something in place so that if somebody walks out or somebody leaves or somebody gets sick or is just out for maternity leave, whatever it is, that we have some systems in place to do that. So you mentioned wanting to have some resources for that.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
So then to go around, perhaps we'll just start from this direction. Commissioner Ross, do you want to add to that?
Fiscal sustainability, of course, makes me think of increasing and diversifying our revenue sources. And I'm not sure that we have very many options on how to do that. But it also makes me think of unrestricted reserve fund balances, which in the last CAFR that we received through 15 shows a trend of increasing, which is a good direction to go in. But we also know that coming up the pike, there are going to be some additional homestead exemptions on the ballot, which most likely will be passed by the voters. That's going to cause us to have a significant decrease in ad valorem tax revenue. So it's important to shore up that unrestricted fund balance, and I would like to see us dedicate some amount of budget money towards bringing that balance up. I believe by resolution we've adopted the minimum GASB requirement, which is 17%. It looks like what we had by the end of 2015 was somewhere around 25%. I would love to see us above 30 if we could get there. It doesn't all have to be in this year, but knowing that this is sort of a bumper crop year tax-wise for us, and knowing that we're going to have losses further down the road, I'd like to see us make a commitment to set aside some funds for that in the budget.
Do we have a consensus on that from everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
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 Yes, okay. So we do have a consensus to put aside funding to kind of bulk up the reserves. For the sake of the audience, and I know we're filming this for people who couldn't be here tonight, there's likely going to be a hit from increasing the homestead exemption, which could impact us, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 200,000?
It's close to 200,000, yes.
Okay. So that means that we can't make up that money by increasing taxes. We don't have that, we're at a 9.7 cap. So to get that, to everybody understand, that means that's going to impact our budget, and we have to find a way to deal with that loss.
If I could piggyback on that, one of the bills that was sort of put into committee and never got out of committee, the Senate put to rest, was the Speaker's proposal to have all sorts of restrictions on municipal taxation, and including requiring that a municipality spend down its reserves to 10% before they're able to increase taxes. And increased taxes doesn't mean increase millage, but it means when you get that bump up from the property values, we wouldn't be able to use that until we spent down our unrestricted reserve to 10%, which is even below the GASB requirement. The Speaker Speaker Corcoran has promised to bring many of those resolutions back, so we could see a further attack on a municipality's ability to raise revenue sources.
And for a community of our size and our budget, it's one thing if you're a very large municipality, let's say Miami Beach or some other municipality, you might be able to live with a hurricane that comes in and if your budget is incredibly large and 10%. It's still not a good idea, no matter how you look at it. So what cities did after the last couple hurricanes is they realized that by hitting their reserves so hefty when the storm came, that they had to decide to shore them up even greater. And so what that did is it raised taxes in many municipalities. So that is why the legislature decided they were going to try and find some way not to have that. Well, for smaller communities like us, one hit. Our reserves right now, I think, maybe 400, don't quote me on that. Ish, 400,000-ish, which is down, not up, even though the capper had it up. We're going to find out probably in the next capper it is not up. And so that's why we're being so conservative on our conversation about how to deal with both the current legislation pieces that passed and literally the assault on municipalities this particular legislative session, and then how we're going to have to deal with that, because this is not going away. The legislator is quite bent on making things fiscally challenging for us, and not just us personally, but many municipalities. So you'll hear that conversation come up a lot. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, so is there anybody else going around the line? Do you have anything to add to Crystal?
I may just have a couple of things to add, which is probably dovetailing off of what Manager Manners has said about having certain policies in place. And I've been just looking into certain things with government finance, and I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have like specific accounting policies and procedures. And now with Beatrice being on board and her cleaning up everything, I'd like to see us, and maybe working with her, to have accounting policies and procedures in place, because like you said, if she's gone all of a sudden, to keep the ship moving forward smoothly, so that a manual or whatever can be handed off to the next person and we're always on the right track. I think in that policy too, I'd like to see things like capital planning being put into that as well, so that we can make plans moving forward with a little more ease. Also, something that I've discussed previously, as well as maybe getting our budget to do some forecasting, so that when emergencies come up or hurricanes or whatever, if we can have some projections forward, we can kind of see where we are and how we're planning, especially capital improvements. So those were just a couple of ideas that I had to try to shore up ourselves financially moving forward.
Yeah, I guess I've got a question is, if I'm correct, the additional homestead exemption will be $25,000,
It's
right?
75,
$25,000. So, and since we're paying, our millage rate is almost 10 mils, so that would be $250 per home would get a discount. Is that correct?
I don't have the numbers, so I don't want to.
Right? It would be
It's
$25,000.
$25,000 of this middle value, somewhere, I think it's between 100 and 125.
Yeah.
Right.
So
But most houses, I think, are somewhere in there. I don't know if anybody's house is assessed at less than 100,000.
because of the Save Our Homes and other, I don't want to call them
Yeah.
loopholes, but opportunities for people
Yeah.
to have exemptions, that we have homes that maybe don't meet that value.
Okay, because my thought was, we're probably looking at closer to maybe $300,000 that
No,
we're going to be.
it's been on. You want to?
We had Beatrice run the numbers, and
Okay.
it's probably going to be closer to 200,000.
Okay, that's not
And it's
bad.
only homes that,
Right.
if it's a rental property,
Right.
they don't have the opportunity to
Right.
take advantage of that.
And I guess that's one of the other things I think we'd really like to, when we get our systems in order, is let's make sure that everybody who's got a rental property is in fact not a homesteaded property, and we are collecting the proper amount of taxes on it. And we're also collecting the proper amount of waste fees on it. I don't know how many duplexes we have that we're only collecting a single waste fee, even though that doesn't go in the general fund. That would help offset some things. And if it's a homestead, if it's a homesteaded property and somebody's actually renting it out, it can be assessed at more than 3% a year. So that may help us a little bit too.
Well,
I'm actually just going to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner John Sardella had mentioned, and actually the village manager had mentioned about make sure that we shore up our policies and our procedures for the back office so that we can have personnel that's a little bit more interchangeable. Because I think part of the problems that we had on the financial side was there was a lot of uncertainty because of the shift from the finance, our prior finance director when we were going through that whole process there. So I think if we have something in place to where, I hate to use the term interchangeable, but if one person is out, somebody can fill that void because they have some established guidelines that they can follow. I think that should help.
Absolutely.
Right, the ship
Cross-training is one of the things that we will be looking forward at not only finance, but all desks, all departments.
And I'd like to also take a look, see just how, if there's anything we do on the back office side, modernizing the systems. Because I know one of the things I've heard from people before is that everything's manual, everything's paper-based, and making sure that we're actually getting more to the digital side of things, I think would help.
I'm going to add one more thing, just because I'm going to be the last. I think I'll do it that way. One of the things that I noted is that we need to have also real-time triggers, because we can't be waiting 2 years down the line to find out where we were 2 years ago. I think once we get BSNA up and running, the inputs for all of our fiscal systems into that system, we'll be able to ask where we are in a budget item. We'll be able to know. I think one of the things that surprised me coming up here is when I asked a question, where are we in this particular budget, the answer was, I don't know. And that had a lot to do with how poorly we kept our records, how poorly we inputted things. That is shifting, that is changing, and that hopefully will move us into more of a progress monitoring type piece so we know where we are. So if any of you ask us a question, we actually can intelligently answer it, which right now we're still digging ourselves out.
Well, and we're very hesitant to answer. When someone says, how much money do we have right now, we're hesitant to answer because if I say we have, $10 million, and obviously that's a made-up number, that will be the number that people remember 6 months down the road, whether it's accurate or not. So we are trying to hold off and
Just to be
get
clear, it's around
accurate
400.
numbers.
Just to be clear, 1,000, not million. Okay, just clarify.
Well, I'm trying to use a number that's clearly not where we are.
Okay. Just before we move on, so my issue was I wanted to make sure we have ordinances in place down the line, not now necessarily, that triggers, so that if the reserve goes below a certain amount, and if we have our fiscal record keeping separately and everything's not co-joined and commingled forever, that we'll be able to have some sort of trigger that sets off so the commission is aware of what's going on. I think what's happened historically is you didn't find out till after the fact. That shouldn't happen again. So I want to see some sort of systems in place where that occurs. And that's what I have for fiscal. So,
Can I add something to Commissioner Tudor? You were talking about help automate processes. And in the last budget, we had provided for a laptop and setup for the code officer and to be able to use a computer with an air card in her car. I don't know if that is actually taking effect.
Those are in place.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's also billing systems, so, and collecting of fines and fees. I think that's something also that needs to be automated. We've talked, I think you mentioned that at the beginning as well. All right, so to go back over fiscal, just so we're all on the same page, some of the things that were mentioned, and Mac, since you are our record keeper who ordered here, I think we all agreed on making sure we have the right personnel. I think and we have that now, so I'm not sure that's something moving forward we need to address, right? Okay. The system's in place. Does everybody agree? I think this has been kind of a collective statement, whether it's invoicing or all the things that we mentioned, which we can get off the notes. Does everybody agree that we need to support whatever we need to digitize, modernize, and get systems that talk to one another?
Yes.
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 Yes? Okay. So all 5 commissioners agree on that. And city manager, we're going to actually put 6.
Absolutely.
Just to say, so all 6 agree. Okay. There was also some mention from Commissioner Ross that ideally we'd like to diversify our revenue sources if we had that ability. One of the things we didn't discuss was our banking system, which would at least give us some more money. And I know we can't make decisions tonight, but I think we can, make sure I don't cross the line here because it may come before us, can we discuss the ability to move forward with that? so that we will find a way to at least make more money on the money we have. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, I thought we agreed at the last meeting to look for banking services.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, I know, I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure that's part of tonight, okay.
Yeah.
And then there was some mention for, Commissioner Ross mentioned trying to bring up the reserves, and we already agreed on that. The next piece was accounting policies and procedures by Commissioner Sardello, Vice Mayor Sardello, for capital planning, forecasting for emergencies and capital improvement. Do we all agree that we can try and find ways to do that so that we can move forward with future planning? So find ways to start beginning forecasting in our financial planning. Do we all agree on that?
I think
Yeah.
it should be part of their just general accounting
Yeah.
practice.
Okay, but-
And it has been in the past, but we've just fallen off of it.
So we're back on that, we're back on the track then. The other piece that Commissioner Bilt had mentioned was making sure we start looking at properties that are, or try to find ways to find properties that are not paying their fair share.
Not paying their fair share.
And maybe homesteaded improperly, because they're actually functioning more like a rental unit than a homestead. And so making sure we're at least on top of that. Is there any concurrence on that? Anybody object to that?
No objection.
I guess, I mean, one of the things that we had found at the code board was when things would come before us, we would see things that were owned by a bank or was owned by a corporation that the people were renting out, that was still listed as being homesteaded. And we're saying, wait a second, this, for 4 years now, it's not been owned by an individual, it's owned by a company. How could it still be homesteaded? And it was. So for 4 years, we didn't get our fair share of taxes.
That is again something that we are looking into. We'll be, as we start to do the rental property, the landlord permits and so forth, we'll be double checking those against the property appraiser to look
Right.
specifically for that.
Yeah.
And so
We also have Airbnbs, which are also another, we have,
that's a
Form of
gray
investment.
area though.
well, the legislature did agree that they have to register,
Okay.
and they have to pay hotel tax and so forth. So there is some things we can look at that.
Yeah, and I have been looking at that to see how we can alter our landlord, how we can amend our landlord permit regulation to include that. Just not quite there yet to bring it forward.
There's going to be another revenue stream, but I'm going to wait to hold off on that, to talk about concessions and rec center and things like that later. That's all, hold off on that. The last was, you talked about cross-training, modernizing systems to do digital, and that's also going to come up again later, so I think we can all, do we all concur that that has to
Yeah.
happen anyway?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so far, everybody agrees. Okay, so next piece is public safety goals. So I'd like to start on this side, just go the other direction, just to change up. Well, so actually, still start with the city manager for,
General overview.
yeah. Public safety
Okay,
goals.
on public safety goals, there are some things that we've been looking at, increasing traffic enforcement, slowing down the speeders, making sure people stop at stop signs, that sort of thing. It just gives the appearance of a greater police presence, and that's already in place and working. We're already seeing, an uptick in the amount of tickets being given out and so forth, and so that will continue. We've got a chief who believes in this system strongly and is supporting it, and the officers are as well. So we also want to decrease cut-through traffic on 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th Avenues, that sort of thing, if any way we can. And I think as we continue to increase the knowledge in the neighborhoods that we do give tickets and so forth, that will get a decrease in some of the traffic, and certainly slow down what does come through, which is equally as good. Additionally, there's equipment that we're looking at, security cameras.
Can I make an announcement on that? We received $20,000. We did go ahead and get the money. We're moving forward on that grant for cameras. We did get that this year from the legislature, which is great news. Just wanted to share that with everyone. Go ahead.
Okay. The cameras, that's going to be coming up, and we're looking for putting those on as many municipal buildings as possible. Certainly Village Hall, the cabin, and we have cameras here, but we could use an improved and extended camera system here as well. So that's one thing coming up. We'd like to look at fire and alarm systems as well for all of the buildings. LED street lighting wherever possible, And then, as far as equipment goes, this is sort of a public works, public safety thing, but we would like to look at getting a truck with a lift for tree trimming, that sort of thing. Sometimes, I mean, we can't send out the public works guys to take down a tree that's tall without renting a lift truck. And it doesn't take long for that cost to add up to. So that was something that we would like to look forward in the next year. And then, of course, roads, potholes, resurfacing roads, all of that as well. So that's a general overview, and we'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay?
Yeah, with the public safety side, what was, I think, a lot of people were focused on was police presence there for a while, but I think we're moving in the right direction with that. I think something we need to be focusing on is improvements to the roads, lighting. I think those are some key areas there. Something that kind of goes back to the police that, something that we may need to consider or look into is the possibility of making sure we are adequately staffed with the policing. And I think that has a lot to do with considering increasing the starting salary for our police officers. I think in order to make the police department here more competitive. I know I was looking at some stats from FDLE for 2014, and out of the 28 police departments in Dade County, we were the second lowest paying police department. And so we were just over 36,000 at that time, and I think the midpoint range was around 46 to 47,000. And I know at the last commission meeting, the chief mentioned about salaries being an issue. So I think in order to enhance the public safety, that really ties to having a well-trained, adequate police force out there. So I think that's one of the things we're going to have to consider.
Commissioner, we are currently in negotiations with the PVA, so we don't want to talk too much about that
Yeah.
right this minute. But we heard you. So,
And so with that, we'll leave that one for now. Is there anything else you want to add for public safety?
No.
Commissioner Bill?
Well, as far as public safety, the one thing that people always say to me are, they're very concerned about not only the speed of the traffic, but the amount of traffic. So I think anything we could possibly do to make it as inconvenient as we can for people to drive through the park. Local residents drive 4 blocks through the park maximum, I think, to get from wherever you're going to the center. So making it more inconvenient for people that are driving 10 or 15 blocks because they're cutting through the park, that would be the thing to do. Maybe more right turn only signs. I've seen other areas where they put up signs that say no right turns from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. during prime traffic hours. I'm not sure if that works. I'm not even sure if we can do it, but that would be an idea. Public safety, again, is the idea of maybe putting up some speed bumps here and there, seeing what we can do. Whether we need approval from the county, whether we can do it ourselves.
we have looked at speed bumps and speed humps and traffic calming devices and so forth. One of the problems is you need to be 700 feet from a stop sign, and we don't have many places that we could actually do that. There's only a handful of places, is my understanding.
Because oddly enough, when I spoke to the fire chief, and he said to me, he said, maybe you need to put up some speed bumps by the stop signs to make people stop. And I was thinking, maybe he doesn't know, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. But 700 feet, this is a small community, and our speeds are very slow. Maybe we can, in fact, put them closer than 700 feet. I am sure there's some areas I've seen them that they are closer than 700.
I know in different states, and
Where's
I know
that
in different
700 feet?
states, I know in different states, they use them. When I spoke to the gentleman who's a traffic engineer from a
Right.
different state, he would basically getting the cost for traffic cushions and other devices. What he said is done sometimes to get people to stop at stop signs for which they do not like to. In other words, ones that are problematic, which we have 118th in Griffin, 111 Place, a couple on 8th Avenue, on 117th. For those types of situations where they're running them all the time, some of the folks thought that, what he told me was that some of the best mechanisms is to put traffic cushions. They're inexpensive. You could even do them portably, although that's trickier. and that can sometimes take care of those specific problem areas. Rather than putting them indiscriminately throughout,
Right.
you pick them through very targeted areas. And then you also try and see how they work, and if it works, you can also remove them. If it's not, there are ways to do this. But I don't know what the county's rules are. This was just a general traffic engineer nationally.
The
Well,
city of
that
Miami,
700 feet came from the county.
Okay.
So that was-
City of Miami, southwest 18th Street, 18th Avenue, off of Carl Way. There are traffic cushions on that street, and I believe there are a few of them that are 40 feet away from the intersections.
we will check that
So
out.
that's really close, so I'm not sure if it's the county that has the final word, or if other municipalities are putting them closer. Let's see what we can do about that. But those are all things that'll make it more inconvenient, and hopefully it'll slow down the traffic and slow down the amount of traffic. I think that's what people are concerned about, the amount of traffic. And if we could spend, again, that would probably come out of our CITT funds, so we're a little bit more easy, it's not coming out of our regular budget. So things like that would probably work, and that's what people are looking for.
Anything else you want to add to public
No.
safety? Okay. Vice Mayor?
Public safety for me, and I think it's been mentioned, is looking at our roads. I'd like to see an assessment done, I guess, of our roads, their condition, what roads actually need resurfacing as a whole, and what roads actually can stand with repair. I don't know the last time we've repaired any roads in the village. And just driving around some streets, I look at, if I was walking, I'd be twisting my ankle in some of the potholes. So I'd like to see that become a priority as far as safety is concerned. I think a couple of commissioners have already mentioned street lighting. I don't know if we need to look at anything to understand positioning of lights, or if it's just going to the LED lighting that would make the light a little better and safer for people walking around late in the evening, walking their dogs and stuff like that. As it is now, I feel like I can barely see people at night when I'm walking down driving down the street.
There's also, may I jump on that? There's two things you said. One is LEDs are cheaper. We pay a significant amount of money every month, if you've ever signed the checks, for electricity for our street lighting. So LEDs would also help in the cost.
Okay.
And the other thing you said on the roads, we did have someone come in, Dr. Bloucher came in from FAU. He has done a preliminary road for at no cost to the village. So we do have some information on what our major issues are, what our major street issues are, and what's causing those issues. And we've also tied them to some of the sea level rises, which may eventually get us funding. We missed this cycle this year, but the hope is that we can tie that in, because we have what's called alligator cracks in a lot of areas, and you all know what an alligator looks like, so this shouldn't shock you. Some of it's from the age of the roads, but a lot of it's from the dampness underneath. Then it's called base failure. So we do have some information already, so we may not need to do too much of that already.
And I don't think this has been mentioned yet, and I guess it ties into the roads as well. I know there was a discussion previously about the condition of our drains, and someone came in to discuss that. I don't know where we are, but I'd like to see the drains, maintenance done on the drains, and because it goes into whether or not we have flooding, the damage that it does to the roads. So I like to see something happening there. And I don't know where we are with that.
We are scheduled to have those cleaned. We have a contract with, I believe it's A&A, to do the cleaning, and I've been in touch with them. They're supposed to have it done this month. So,
Look at David.
but there's still other areas too. Let's keep it in mind. There's other areas that we need to really do something. 9th Avenue and 115th Street in front of the Raymond's house, in fact. There's that dip in the road where it tends to flood and pull, and so that's something that we need to look at. I've spoken with some people who suggested that perhaps that's an area that we build up the road a little bit, and there's the other option of adding another dry well to it, essentially, so that the drain has more capacity to absorb water and to distribute that. So,
I know we've mapped the drains now twice, correct?
I'm sorry?
I said we've mapped the drains now twice. We've
Yes.
expended 2 expenditures, right, so we know where the drains are, correct? Okay,
Right.
good. Just want to make sure we're full on
and it will still be a surprise.
that. Okay. Commissioner Ross.
So I have a couple of thoughts in this area. First of all, in the area, under the subject of code, I think some of our public safety goals should focus on code. We had implemented, passed an ordinance several years back to help the city handle abandoned properties, and for some reason that ordinance never became part of our muni code, but it is the law in the village, where the village, if there's a property that's a public safety, under the village's manager's guidance, we can go in, secure that property, board it up, and pass on to the, we can always bill the property owner for it. The one hitch was we were trying to get the tax collector's office to do that job for us, and we were not able to get their agreement to do it. But I think that we do need to focus on properties like that, and I know of one on 121st. There may be others. There aren't as many as there used to be, thank goodness, but it's a tool that we have and we should use. Also, we should move forward with the construction regulation, because that becomes a public safety issue when those construction sites are not managed properly and are not shielded from the general public. And those are not money items, but they're, I think, things that we should work towards having in place. Public safety, for me, is also our employee safety. And part of that is equipment at Public Works. We had put in the budget to get a new flatbed truck to replace the 2001 Chevy that they're currently using with over 100,000 miles on it. We have in the budget $6,000 for a capital lease in this year. So I'd like to get that in place by now. If
we have the estimates for those, and so I'm hoping to have that on the agenda for August.
Okay. I would support what you're saying about looking into getting a lift. That would make the job easier for them. And also making sure that we budget some funds, we budget properly to take care of our trees, to maintain our trees, because they sometimes become a safety issue, and certainly with some of the older senescent Australian pines, they come down at the most unexpected times, so we should be on top of that. Continuing with the idea of employees being part of public safety, we have several new police officers, and I believe we should budget to make sure that they have vests. Last year we budgeted for 2. They're $700 a piece, so 2 is $1,400. It's not the kind of thing that we could have, a vest in the closet waiting for someone to come in, because they have to be fitted to them and everything. But we should have the tax dollars, I think, the monies are set aside to anticipate that need, because we know that we're still hiring police officers. And with regard to speeding, I'd like to see us invest some money on speed meters, either the stationary ones that we have, like we have on 6th Avenue, which the officers won on a Ticket or Click It challenge. Either those stationary types that are solar operated, or the speed trailers that we can move around. And the trailers, I think, become a little more sensitive, being dragged all around. The parts and wires and things that tend to fall apart. So, I leave it to you to decide what is the better product. But I think that those speed meters are effective in helping people keep within the speed limit.
I think you guys hit almost everything. Left myself for last. I agree with the hazardous tree issue. I also concur that if we're going to be doing regular tree trimming, we can look into fiscally deciding, and that's really up to you, which is what is better for us, an actual lift for them, or periodically renting, or contracting out, depending on the size of the tree. So our guys, I'm sure, are not going to handle something like a Norfolk pine. That's, yeah. So
Even with the lift, if we do that, it's going to take the whole Public Works team. So we will lose, a day of work for them. And that may be something that, rather than a lift truck, we subcontract out.
Okay.
But we'll need to do an RFP for that because we need to have a company on board for that. And
We don't have one currently.
We
correct?
don't have
From
one
our current
currently, is my
conversation.
understanding.
Okay.
Don't we have a company that does the tree trimming for us now?
No,
The
not that I'm
contract
aware
ran
of.
out,
We had Raydell, I
We-
believe, but
but their contract, I think, ran out
I
now.
believe so.
Oh, did it?
So we need to, I'd like to send out an RFP because they didn't, they didn't do a great job towards the end, so I'd like to send out an RFP for that.
Okay.
Okay, so we have kind of a starting point. This is a big issue, and if the team doesn't mind, I know the audience is here, I'm sure they want to participate, so if we haven't covered anything, either fiscal sustainability or public safety goals, is there anything that the public would like to add to those goals that we haven't mentioned? And if you don't mind, Matt, just for sake of ease of them reading, if you could point it towards them, so they can also hear it, that'd be great. If there's anything that we haven't mentioned under fiscal sustainability or public safety goals specifically, don't forget we still have all these other categories that are on here to go through. So I just kind of wanted to pause, because those are really key pieces for everyone, especially public safety.
I think the roadways is something, people talk to me about two different things. They usually talk about three, maybe. Police, roads, medians.
We're going to get to medians, so
But I'm just thinking about, is the roads the infrastructure needs, or?
there's two.
I think things are going to be.
There's going to be overlap.
Yeah.
I don't think any one category will be perfect, but I do think if you're talking about repaving all the surfaces, which we haven't done in, 50 years? I think I tried to look back, and I think we went back 40 or 50 years. I forget the exact number. We were trying to see when the last time was we paved roads. With some exception, there are, obviously Griffin, 6th Avenue rather, has been paved because those are not our roads, those are state roads.
We've made
So we're going to have some
Okay.
overlap.
Okay.
So let's.
Okay, well, one of the people did say to me, we did some repair work about 10, 12 years ago, and that seems to have stood up. And basically, the repair work were potholes, repaired the potholes.
We have an expert who's been here for 20 years.
That's what I'm talking about, right,
Try 15 to 20 years ago.
15 to 20 years ago. And we also, the roads, we took care of the edging, and the edging seems to have stopped them from deteriorating any further. So that's maybe the way to go.
Well, I also
Bob
talked to Dr.
Right.
Boucher, and one of the things he said is previously, back when we made these roads and we did the base to put the roads on the asphalt on, some of the challenges are we were putting on 3/4 of an inch of asphalt when you need a minimum of 2 to 2.5 minimum. Other issues were that the trucks that we have now going around the corners that we have deliveries with, and concrete trucks and all this other stuff, our roads were never designed to handle that type of tonnage. So some of the cornering or edging, he said that would be a greater challenge. Because, and then we talked about why 6th Avenue holds up so well is because they have a completely different set of specs for DOT than our roads that we do. So, and that's a whole different way they do their base. So to make it simpler, it will be challenging. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be addressing these issues.
Right.
I agree. It just, some of these are a funding issue. I
Maybe to
think.
do repairs over the course of years instead of actually repaving the whole street, maybe the way to go. I don't know.
Is anybody in the audience want to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I should say, and Public Works does go out, and if you guys see a pothole, let us know. We go out and look for them, and we do patch those. But, we can't be everywhere all the time either, so please let us know.
You have one in front of your house that you're fond of, let us know. Okay, and then, is it Barbara and then Mac? Go ahead, Barbara. And then Brian.
I'd like to
Brad.
see more striping along the sides
Okay.
and stop bars. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'll put that under audience. So striping specifically for the stoppage, as
Right.
just at stop signs, right?
Well, when it goes around the edge of a median, it gives people a better idea where to turn so they're not turning on the dirt. And also
Okay.
the stop bars at stop signs, people will stop when they see it rather than just
Roll
ending
through.
after the middle of the intersection.
Okay, Mac?
A couple of things. I think Harvey hits on something really, really, really key, and that is do everything you can just to encourage people not to come. It's not a destination for anybody except people who live here. If you don't live here or work at the Village Hall, you have no reason to be in Biscayne Park. Regarding street lighting, I know this is a conversation about public safety, but keep in mind that aesthetics also come into play here, and there are quality of light issues that become very important. So the color and the intensity of light becomes very important. I know it's a matter of public safety, but you don't want our streets to become blue hazes with very safe lights, and it just looks like a combat zone. And some cities, I read about Seattle, I believe, installed all kinds of streetlights for public safety, and then had to take them all back out because it just was so horrible. They spent so much money taking out, I think it may have been Portland, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. So be careful when you talk about, when that topic does come up. It's an aesthetic thing as well. You know I'm gonna talk about construction regulations on Mr. Construction Fence, so yay. Lots of X's next to that one, please. And then I just thought of something when Barbara was talking, she made me think of something. I may ask her to come back and add something.
I believe it was David, would you have your hand up? And
It was
then
Brian.
Brian, I'm sorry, Brian, David, and then Judy.
Brad?
I said Brian.
Brad,
Brad.
Brad. That's
That's all right.
begins with a B. It's the same.
Nobody knows which one we are.
I'm gonna have to let that one down. Brad, my apologies.
All the guys with the dog. Anyway, see if I can remember what I was thinking of. Okay, I have one that kind of touches on both. Public safety, with Harvey, I think, at least let's explore, not just take the word, one individual word that we can't have speed bumps. Explore it a little bit, fill it out, initiate it. I think there are always exceptions, and I think if we approach the right people, we may be able to get a special exception to at least one or two or three in some problematic for speed bumps or speed posts. The other thing is public safety, and actually this kind of falls into the fiscal as well. Public safety around the park, I think we need to consider requesting to lower our speed limit around the park, directly around the park again. I think that certainly would help, and especially if we patrol, is it 8 that goes through, that would be, since there's one of the three streets, that possibly, is it 9?
Thanks.
That would help control some of the traffic. Another thing is, you guys have been talking about controlling the people coming through the park, because even some of the police officers I've talked to in the past have said the majority of the crime is crimes of opportunity, people coming through, people, and one of the things that I'm seeing is we have a great asset here with the rec center in the park. And fiscally, we're not using that asset. We're not really gaining a lot of money from this asset. It's just an attribute to the park. My question is, how many residents are really using the park, and could we utilize, and this is just an idea, could we utilize the park and the rec center in a better way and generate money, which eventually we're going to need, because we do have that homestead exemption coming up, and that's going to be significant for Biscayne Park and for our income. And in a better way, and also make the park more resident friendly. Very few residents really use the park. And plus, we have a lot of external individuals using the park, which we're trying to pull the amount of traffic in the park. So, supporting the use of the park is actually inviting people into the park to use the rec center and the facility. But why not take a different approach to it and look at, not the whole thing, but, being friendly to our surrounding communities, but redevelop a portion of the park, or give some part of the rec center in the park to the residents, something that the residents will actually use. Because we don't. I'd say less than 10% of the residents are using the rec center today.
And that's something we'll be looking at going forward. One of the things that, we've got a new rec manager coming in, Lisa Thornell. I think you guys all know him from before. He's coming back to join us. And one of the things that I want to look at is programming that's actually relevant to our residents. And so there will be more of that. And as we have more programming relevant to our residents, I think we'll see probably a downturn in people from other communities coming here to necessarily use it, particularly the troublemakers, And so.
Just as a point of reference for everybody, the police have under the new chief, have a lot more presence in the park. They don't just drive around the park, they park and get out and walk into the park regularly during their shifts, and that seems to has helped a bit as well. I just wanted to share that with you as a nice way to say that our policemen are out there. I think it's David and then Judy, and then Ernesto.
So I'm glad you had Brian, I mean Brad, though.
I'm not, you have no idea how long I'm gonna have to pay for that one. Go ahead.
Just to echo a few things, and I had a similar conversation one night with Harvey about the speed limit around here, because this is an after-school program here every day, and I think you could get this designated, the streets here designated, so that you could lower the speed limit, which would help. And I also agree about using the park for the residents as not just a source of revenue, but public safety, but also to improve our quality of life. This is a couple of things, and I know I've had this discussion, maybe not had this discussion. I mean, this area would have a little like ice cream stand, cafe, something out here, you know, in this area where you open it up, where people who are here could walk in. There would be traffic concerns, but it's just, and you could have people from the outside coming in, which would maybe come with that. But I think that would be really cool to have something like that here. And also, you know, we've had the discussion, and maybe this falls under something else than public safety, but just to raise the issue of the dog park, which has been brought up, and I know I emailed you about that, and it's been on Nextdoor at least 4 times with major conversations since we've been here for 2.5 years. So
We're gonna have a whole
maybe that
section
could
on the
be
park.
incorporated into.
We have a whole section on the park here.
But I do think
But-
that also comes into the public safety issue, because people walking their dogs, there's times at night or close to dusk when you go to walk your dog, and you can be killed out here sometimes when the cars going by. So it's both, it's not just because I've got a great yard my dog can play in, but I think people want to have a safe place for their dogs. The other thing about Barbara's point about the stripes on the road, I think if we can add to that some reflectors,
Yeah.
because code enforcement has been telling people to take down the reflectors they put up in those kind of odd areas. Like our next door neighbor, he had these reflectors out because people would come right up onto his swale, and then they never quite made it to my yard because he has these bumpers. I guess you allow the big white bumpers, but you don't allow the reflectors, which makes no sense to me, because the reflectors are a lot less, you know, ugly, if you will, than these big white, you know, cement blocks. But the cement blocks seem to be allowed to keep people from riding on your swale, but you can't put a simple reflector up.
How about we put a category that says, find a solution for people running over our swales? I think that was brought up in the last meeting, David, and I think it was Janie who talked about possibly using bushes or things that are more aesthetic that would create that same visual. I know I can tell you what I did. I've lived on the corner for years, and I have the things, and they've migrated back out, and every year I have to dig them up, and I don't always do it, and I have to move them back. But I essentially put vegetation, and that really stopped a lot of it from my perspective, if that helps. But I know there's some issues about what to plant, what not to plant as well, but I do think for corner properties, and also narrow streets have the same problem. As I expressed last time when we talked about road safety, one of the challenges, if you have 12 to 15-foot roads that are supposed to be a minimum of 20 feet to have 2 cars pass, invariably when 2 cars go next to each other, somebody's gonna have to move over somewhere. So that always is a challenge. And some of the options I know people wouldn't want, which is if we ever had the money to widen the streets and take back some of the swale, which nobody's particularly fond of. So, as I said, some of these are just things we've learned to live with over the years, or we find solutions, and I do think we need to give some of the homeowners solutions, because we do have a lot more traffic and a lot more trucks coming through. And that is a quality of life issue as well. And an expense as well. Judy?
Okay, the visibility triangle is also a public safety issue, and when people do put bushes on the corners to keep people off of their property, and we've got one on 10th Avenue and 116th Street, and
Yes, you do.
I have rolled out to work before and nearly had the front bumper taken off my car because you can't see. And what they've done is they put the planting where it needs to be, but they let it grow out, and we've dealt with it over and over and over, and someday somebody's gonna get in there.
I know the intersection, it is problematic. And there are several in the park that have that issue, and that's an enforcement issue.
Right.
We have the laws already for visibility triangle, and when I talked about vegetation, we're talking 2 feet, 3 feet, not something that is enormous, yeah.
I really do very much agree with Barbara on the white stripe for the stop line. reflective stripe, and I don't mean just spray paint, but
The right one.
reflective stripes, I think it will save us a lot. And it will, people can't say, well, I didn't know there was a stop sign there, it's in their face.
And Manager, I know we've talked, Mr. Manager, about cutting down some of those issues already and sending Public Works out to address some of those signs that are overgrown and hard to see, because there's a reason why some of them are running them, is if you're not from here, there's no excuse because people from here are running them too. But if you're not from here, the excuse can be we couldn't see the approach to the stop sign and things like that. So there are some areas that have a problem with that, and I have talked to him about it.
Takes care of that. I will also tell you, I have called Caesar before and he complained about potholes and they were gone in 24 hours. And I have no problem that they Caesar.
Shout out there for Caesar, thank you. Thank you, and Ernesto. And then 1, 2, and then 3. Ernesto.
I think that the main issue here is that people don't respect our ground here. I saw a few days ago somebody giving the finger to the speed limit, right? The guy goes by my house doing this to the speed limit.
With all due respect, we're on camera, so.
And then right now I see a guy that lives next to us going by the stop sign.
Well, I will speak for our police officers. They seem very intent on understanding the meaning of the word respect, whether you live here or not. So I can tell you that I personally have also encountered, some of us in the audience and some of us up here have had the privilege of attempting to get people to slow down or stop, and have had unique encounters in which they've been less than stellar, sometimes bordering on violence or threats of violence. So I think we should let our police force do that, having done it myself and had recently been yelled at by the chief, correctly so. I thought I was the mayor and I could go out and stop somebody and they threatened me. So I will tell you that let the police do their job, but do report it immediately. That's my advice from a person who didn't take my own advice.
At the same time, I guess, nobody likes the speed bumps or anything like that, but I think they are necessary. There's nothing I can do. If the police is not there, people fly by, residents, they are very respectful people. There are other ones that they are not used to that. They just grew up in that environment. The other thing is lighting. As I always have told Bill, the first time that I came to the park, I fell in love with this place because there was no lighting. Yes, beautiful village style, quality light. I can see the stars, everything. Now, you guys are afraid and want to put lighting everywhere. When I come to let's say if I come from north, I-95, and I go 120 feet, I see all these poor houses, big white lights, it's a supermarket, low class, poor. And now, let's say, 8 hours nearby your house is just like a supermarket.
He did. He yelled at me because just for the record, he gave me a very hard time because I put some lights up, so I'm just letting everybody know. He's not me to take them down. There are alternatives, because there are stargazers and so forth who do lights and they do go to red lighting, and and I think Mac, you talked about it, there are alternatives to do both, where you have the light, but it does not impede your eyes as much and is not as much of a problem for stars. So there is balances, and I'll share that information with you a bit later. Okay? Then we can discuss my lighting being changed. I think the last comment, I think, is Rosemary and then Bob.
We have a lot of lights from Florida Power. The problem is sometimes the overgrown trees blocking the light from coming down onto the streets. And this isn't even talking about foliage on the stop signs, but you can't see the stop signs, or overgrown foliage, you can't even see the street signs. But for lighting, if Florida Power and Light can be encouraged to trim back some of the lights away from their poles, foliage away from the lights, I think that would be an improvement as well. Because I know a lot of times there's so much overgrowth, the light can't,
Right.
just like out here, we have to trim back because the light doesn't shine enough because of the overgrown foliage.
That's one thing, let me address that. Being a photographer, I know a lot about lighting. Instead of having a light 20 feet up in the air and having the tree block it, the nothing we're gonna do is gonna change the tree. It's gonna grow back. What we need to do, instead of having it 20 feet up in the air, is have it 10 feet up in the air, or 12 feet. And instead of it being, let's say, a 20-degree, 40-degree. So it covers the same amount of area, but the trees won't block it. And you just have the light, the reflector made so it shines on the street, so we don't get any light pollution.
Well, before we go into changing all the streets down to 10 feet, take care of the ones that we already have to try to eliminate some of the foliage that's.
That's what I'm saying, you're gonna eliminate the foliage, and 6 months from now, it's all gonna grow back.
How much it's gonna cost to replace all those poles? What's-
We're not replacing the poles, let's see about what I'm saying is just lowering the lights.
At whose expense?
I have no idea. I'm not sure if they'll do it, if we'll do it.
Remember, we have wish lists tonight?
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're talking about, this is broad strokes tonight, just to be
Well,
clear.
since it's Florida Power and Lights poles, and they should be the ones who drop the lights.
Bob?
Two things, going on with what Rosemary was saying and what Harvey was saying. My suggestion is to contact Florida Power Light to see if they lower those lights. There's a limit how far the lights, because FDOT, I don't remember the distance.
There's rules,
But
yeah.
there's a rule, it can't be any closer because of trucks and stuff going on. But at least contacting them and see, because if you could have all the lights that we have now actually flood out on the streets, people will be amazed at how many lights we have.
yeah.
The other thing is I probably would fall under fiscal sustainability, but over the years, we have records, and we just keep getting more hard copied records. And when different cases come up in the code board for fine reductions, many of the times were huge fines. Staff is unable to find the trail of those things, and a lot of times those fines have to be reduced way down. Over the years, we've been talking about having a company come in here, budgeting for, scan, index all of the paperwork. I've already talked to him, I just want everybody to hear me. It costs money.
He's on it, go ahead.
Yeah.
I know he is, but I want everybody else to hear. Because it looks like, so we spend money to go ahead and have everything scanned and indexed into a nice database, but actually it's gonna save us money by spending money. You have to spend some money to save a lot of money. And then it's gonna free up the time of staff to be able to do more things.
And so everybody knows, we not only have that, we also have records that we have to pay to keep stored for years and years in a vault that costs us money. So long-term, and there's no easy way to search. So that's also an enormous amount of staff time, having to go through street records and files in different buildings and so forth to get information that hopefully in a database they'd be able to pull up. And you want to discuss real quickly that you're already working on that, just so everybody knows?
We are, actually. I told Mr. Anderson earlier today that I have met with someone and looked at purchasing a database and having all of our records scanned into that so that it would be easily searchable and easy to maintain and increase going forward, to add to going forward. So that would be a huge help to us. So.
And I'm just bringing it up so the commission can go ahead and help fund it.
And I think we have funding actually in this year's budget for
Right,
that.
But I don't think you're gonna find it enough. So at the next year's budget, you're gonna need to have more in there.
That's very possible.
Yeah, I think that's something we really need, because that actually is the basis from everything else is built on. Whether we have code violations, whether property lines are, whether we're collecting enough taxes, whether we're collecting enough trash from these people, enough sanitation fees, and everything else. And we need to be able, when people come into the village hall and ask about something, it would really be nice if we could give them an answer.
Well, we need to be a professional organization.
Exactly.
And that's not the image we portray to people when they come
No.
back and say, well, I want to find out the permits that were pulled for my residents,
Right.
go back. Oh, well, we got to go here, and that's going to take, it should never be that way. And you're going to have to make, it's like any infrastructure project, you're going to have to make that initial cash outlay, but it's going to pay you back in the long run. And that's what we're going to end up having to do. Those are the tough calls.
One of our residents happens to be in here when they bought their house. There's a certain record that they needed to find for when the roof was put on.
just sort of stumbled across this particular document.
I think, if you guys don't mind now, I'd like to go back, because I think everybody brought up really some good points.
I remembered what I wanted to say.
Okay, go ahead, Matt, fine.
It was me, Bob, and Christian helped me find that, and it was like, I remember Christian, you
I do
remember,
recall
it was
that.
a footnote that someone hand wrote in a margin that saved us a lot of money on our roof, like, that's what we need right there, but it was, a lot of times, we didn't do it either. So, here's what I wanted to add. Christian sent out a statement of the letter you mailed out. I thought that was enormously useful in terms of lots of things, including public safety, because it said out loud, there was some public safety stuff in there, and he said, we kind of expect this from residents. I think that's really important. And I think that should come from you guys as well. I think there should be kind of a statement about some public safety stuff. It's like, this is our home, and this is how we all have to treat it. And I think it's important for people to hear that from our elected officials. Okay, a couple of really concrete things very quickly. Asphalt, in terms of swale and development. I think asphalt is a real first of all, I think it's horribly ugly, but my point here in this conversation is that it's a public safety issue. Because when people develop their swales with asphalt, you can't tell where the road stops and the swales, and the developed parking on the swales starts. And I live on a curve where it's a real issue. Go drive down the curve on 11th Place, rocks came over when we walked in. When you look down that street, you don't see a street the width of the street. You see a street this wide because there's asphalt development on both sides of the street. And I garden a lot in the front, and I watch cars going northbound on 11th, and here they come on the road, and then when they get to a certain point, they start going off the road a little bit because the road looks wider because the surface is asphalt. And then there's a pole, and I've seen people go, oh shit, oh, sorry, oh, crap, there's a pole, and they come back on the road. And I think it's a matter of public safety. It's also horribly ugly, but I think it's a matter of public safety. Also, parking on swales altogether, I think, is a matter of public safety. As soon as you line the cars with roads, and it's never gonna go back the other way, it's only gonna become, if you allow it, it'll become more and more and more parking on swales. Our roads are lined with cars, and now it's a more dangerous place to drive and walk. So I think swale parking altogether is a matter of public safety. And the last thing is corner parking is an issue. We have people parking on swales, approved spaces or not, that when you pull up to a stop sign, there are cars parked and you can't see to turn in front of, I don't know Mo's address, but it's Mo's house. So when you pull up to 117th to 11th Place, there's a car parked there and you cannot see, and at a certain point you inch out and you have to kind of go for it.
There is, just so you know, there is regulations in place to do that. We are working with the police and so forth on how to address that in a more consistent, frequent manner. Okay, so moving on, I think what we need to do right now is just to make sure we have consensus on the items that we've discussed. So can we go through public safety? We'll mention roads, lighting, and police staffing. So we'll just talk about police staffing, and specifically you talked about things that we cannot talk about. So how about we talk about reserves? Do we have a consensus that we do want to obviously increase the reservists? And I think that was one of the things that...
Yeah.
Okay. So do we have a consensus to increase, at least continue with the increasement of reserves?
I think we used to have 15, we're up to 9 or 10.
20.
Let's go to 20, whatever we can do, let's do.
Well, I mean,
Because the reserves cost us very little.
yeah, especially speaking with the, sitting down, village manager sitting down with the chief and finding out what does he need to be fully staffed to give the coverage that he needs for the village, and let the chief determine how many reserves, how many does he need to be,
Absolutely.
paid
To
for one
support
officer.
the chief on his
Yeah.
numbers.
Right.
Do we agree with that?
Yes.
I think we're going way deep into the weeds into what the chief and the manager should decide. And I thought that our purpose here was to set priorities and with a couple of goals in order to guide them with the budget process.
Well, part of what we're doing today, we are looking at big picture, but I think part of the challenge is you also have to put this in a budget. So if there's going to be items that are needed, I think that at least we agree that fully staffing the police department as much as we humanly can, we support that in any way possible, and then they decide how to do it. We're supposed to be doing the what, not the how. Okay, the goal tonight is the what, not the how. So I think we can concur that we'd like it as fully staffed as possible. Do we have a concurrence on that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, I leave it up to the manager.
Okay, so 4-1. The next thing, we talked a lot about roads in general for different issues. One of them is repairing, resurfacing, bringing our roads back up to some level. We are talking with the county now to talk about repaving of a couple roads. We're trying to get the county to see if their budget will allow for 2 of our roads to be redone. They've, from end to end, of course, we've picked our worst roads and our longest roads. I think the village manager selected 117th and 119th probably, but we're still waiting to hear whether or not the funding's going to be there. I think, just to make sure we're correct, do we all agree that we need to use our CITT funds as much as possible to start moving in the direction of bringing our roads back to levels? And that whether that's potholes, whether it's resurfacing, whether it's full roads, whatever we can manage to do. Is everybody in agreement here that we need to move forward either short-term, and then we'll talk about long-term on roads?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a copy of that preliminary report you referred to from Dr.
I
Blanchard.
gave it to you, and did you share it with everybody? Because I asked, I don't know if you did.
I apparently didn't, so let me do that. I will
Okay,
do
yeah,
that.
I did send it a while ago. And it was not specific to each individual road, although we drove around the whole park with Mario at the time. He couldn't, because he was actually in the meeting, I think, with you, Russ. But I think we looked at all of the roads and what the problems were, and there was a consensus on where the problems were and what kinds of problems we had. There was no, and the belief that the through streets should have been the ones that are the most safe, so that the avenues were the ones that need to be mostly addressed. However, they weren't the worst streets that we had. Okay, that's just a quick synopsis for
I
everybody
think
else.
maybe one of the things we really need to do is with the road repairs, is again, have somebody come in and say, give us a quote on doing
Estimate.
this. What would it cost to fix this? And then we can extrapolate and say, okay, great, this is a 30-foot piece, this is what he said's wrong with it, it's gonna cost us this much. How much would it cost us to do more of the village?
And there were specific, in the
Yeah.
report, there were specific, and I'm doing this for the audience's sake, there were specific issues that came up. One, some of them were, we threw some resurfacing of 3/4 of an inch, and it made a mess of the road. Some of it a lot of it was the corner stuff, which we talked about for repairs. A lot of it was base failure from moisture and length of time and use of road, which would require complete
Right.
resurfacing. There were a lot of areas to that extent, mostly on the east-west bound streets.
Right.
Our avenues weren't as bad, but we also had some really kind of interesting areas with North Miami water pipes. So where there were
Yeah.
spots where clearly the road is dipping or there's some caving in, associated with broken water pipes or leaky galvanized pipes underneath the road. So we had some of those issues that we have to deal with North Miami. And there were also route issues. So anybody who's ever bicycled, will tell you that 119th Street is not their favorite street to bike on. We have a lot of issues with our smaller medians that have a lot of routes. That is a permanent problem that cannot be fixed, no matter how much more money you put at it. Mostly what you could do is a utility cut, try and make what I call nicer speed bumps. That's the most that you can repair those, okay? And that's always going to be a continued ongoing battle as long as we have tree-lined streets.
Maybe we should also see about increasing the radius of the corners. You see what, I think that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
Instead of the radius being a 2-foot radius, make it a 15-foot radius, so it's a wider turn.
Only some of the streets will be, because we talked about that.
Yes, some
Very few
will.
of the streets will be able to handle that. And the other issue was the actual width of the street, and what to do about that. And the answer was probably, what I was told is our streets aren't as bad as, and I won't mention the city so I don't get in trouble with that city. There were other cities that had much worse streets than we do, that we weren't as bad as we thought we were, in terms of overall village. But at the end of the day, we're not going to have 36 wide bike lane, sidewalk streets and that kind of thing. But what we can have is streets that are easier to ride over, friendlier to pedestrians, and more consistent where they're not have issues of trip and fall for pedestrians. I think those are it.
Okay.
I'm being told to
Yes.
wind out of
Oh.
time. So let's get moving. So let's do a consensus on everything here that we have. Okay. Street lighting. I know there was some differences on that. Well, let's do drains. Does everybody agree that we need to maintain our drains and
Yes.
make sure? And then if there are specific areas that have issues, such as a low-lying area like in front of David Raymond's house or other areas, there's a couple in the park, that we can address those as part of our road issue.
But they're all on the board now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So we
I
just
mean,
go back.
if we make everything a priority, then nothing.
Nothing gets done.
We have to really, pick 8 things that we say, this is what we're gonna back up, and another 8 things that we say, this is on our wish list to do, because
Well,
as
first
good
I
as
wanna-
Christian is, he's not gonna be able to get all this done in the next budget.
Well, and if if Christian has, underneath public safety, if Christian has, a dozen
Well, I
plus
just want to get to
things,
what we all agree on
then we're
first,
not
right?
going to have enough
Yeah.
money to really
So
actually get
together
anything
then.
accomplished,
Well,
so.
And that's where, actually, Commissioner Ross's dots will come in handy.
Right,
So
I thought we just all
at
first
the end of
agree on
this-
it, and then
yeah.
go back and hit the dots. That's what I was intending to do. That's
And
okay
that way
with
we
me.
can use that to prioritize. First priority is green, second yellow,
Or have tos, normal twos, and things like that. Okay, so let's go back over, just real quick, because we're almost done. Main issues, I'm trying to do ones that everybody mentioned together.
I think it was the tree trimming, the roads.
Aren't they all on the board though?
Yeah.
But we can just,
Yeah.
you don't have to recap them. We can just go to the board and
Fine,
everyone
go to
do their
board.
things.
That's fine. Mac, you want to read some of the stuff up, because I can't read them from here, that's the problem. That's why I did it this way.
Before Barbie has to go, Commissioner Bill, how about if we hit the recreation?
Mhm.
Because the rest are really like global, but
Right.
there might be some specific items you want in there, and I wouldn't want you to leave without putting your dots up.
I'm gonna leave it about 10 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll jump then to
Recreation?
rec center, yep. Which is under community, recreation,
And
cultural
cultural
services and
services.
activities. Okay,
Yes.
and you're starting.
I am starting? Okay. As other people have said, I wish the rec center was had more programs that the residents actually took advantage of. My thought is, the more the rec center is being used, the less problems we will have with it. I hate to say that it's like gentrifying a neighborhood. The more traffic there is, the more people that are there, it tends to chase other people away. I don't know, very truthfully, I don't know much about the rec center. I'm not really quite sure what we should do. I don't know. I'd like to see the basketball courts. At one time, we did have locks on them. When we didn't want people to use them, we either took down, I think we took down the hoops, or we closed them off. If they can't be used after a certain time of night, make it so nobody can use them. Just putting up a fence, I don't think will be enough. I'm not sure.
Based
Lisa would
upon-
probably know.
Based upon experience I've had for years in the school system, there's absolutely nothing you're going to do unless you get the hoops up, which is why they now design them so they close them. I think the issue you're making is who's using the hoops, how frequently, and that can be a programming issue where we can have the little kids use it a lot and allow the children to use it. I think that's part of the issue I had with the basketball. Like I went by the other day and there were 25, 30-year-olds using the hoops, and there was not a single young kid to be found. And that was my concern, is that I just wanted to make sure that there was some use there available to a lot of the younger kids.
And we'll be working on that to maybe give different age groups different times where they, their age group can be using the hoops, so.
And also something that I started a discussion with Manager Manners, and I would like to continue the discussion with our police chief, is maybe having one of the police athletic leagues join with us, and so that they can have programming in the basketball courts. And one, I think that helps also with public safety, because you have a police presence and they're coordinating these events, that I think would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to add?
No. As I said, it's the one thing I'm not knowledgeable about at all.
Jenny, do you want to go ahead and continue on anything you want to do, and then we'll jump around?
Yeah, with the rec center, I think one of our residents, Brad has mentioned it, I'd like to see the rec center and the park in general attract more residents. I thought, having Wi-Fi here, being born and raised in New York, I thought the idea of having like chess or checker tables, I want to see, it's like we have a gem here that's not being used. I do like the idea that I think David Raymond just mentioned of having a concession stand, because that would also bring a little bit of a revenue stream as well, coming from the rec center and here in the park. I've mentioned dog parks a lot. I don't know what the consensus is here with the commission, but I'd like to see that happen, because it's a way for neighbors to get together, and not just walking your dogs in the street, but having some place where you can all meet and enjoy each other and get to know one another. But I think that we really do have a gem here that we need to figure out how to use, one with bringing in a revenue stream and also bringing our community together. So I think that probably also what you just mentioned, Manager Matters, is creating more programming that I think also will help generate revenue as well. So those are my ideas.
I wanted to kind of mention a few. I had the opportunity over the weekend with someone who does restaurants and does things formally and has developed things, and I shared with the manager before I did it that I was going to have the individual look through our kitchen and give us an idea of what could be done to generate revenue. And I will tell you that our kitchen is monetarily to do it would cost money, but basically it's already set up to do that. It has a drain in the floor, it has concession stands, it has all of that. But one of the issues was for a business or somebody who would want to do that type of thing for the community, there would have to be other draws to bring people here regularly and more consistently, or it isn't worth their ability to develop it. And some of the ideas, what they really loved was the fact that you have a kitchen, you have an area right next to the kitchen where you could have seating, whether it's out inside this room or whether it's out over here with the seating, so that the parents would have oversight of their children. And there are other cities that have done this. So I'm not sure, this is more of a long-range piece that would have to be phased in. You could start with smaller things and vendors coming in for special events where we know people are here for, and you could do it slower. But I also agree that whether it is a community garden, whether it is a gym, whether it is intergenerational equipment, I did all the stats on who lives in the park, the village, and what the average age groups are. And what was really interesting, it was incredibly diverse. It is really evenly spread. The majority, though, are 30 and 40-year-olds, okay, evenly split. And so I think we have to look at what our demographics are and who we're trying to attract if we want the residents to come back to the park. It has to be for everybody and not just for one age group. If you'll let this get finished, and then I'll be happy to have, we're gonna do that, Dan, and I know you're passionate about it, so I'm not gonna, we'll come back and have you speak on it. I know you both are, so I promise you'll have your say.
Okay. Can I add one thing that we used to do? I don't know, how long has it been since we had a movie out here on a Saturday night?
But my understanding is under, the last manager, sort of all events were canceled, and all of that.
Yeah, because I think that was a great thing about having a movie, have the foundation do stuff.
Right.
Have fun, have a potluck or something.
And I'd like to bring some of that back. The food and tunes that the foundation would do, the movie nights that we would do, and to have movies that are really great for all ages. And so I think that was something that was fun. Typically during the summer, the attendance on those tends to fall off because it's just too darn hot to sit out there and watch a movie.
Right.
But in the winter season, absolutely, it's a great use.
We've heard this over and over again, Vita courses, we've heard, equipment and so forth. If you'll notice, we have two great tot lots, but we don't really have equipment for the majority of population that live here, which is 30, 40-year-olds, and even some older people like my wife who exercises like crazy. But I think there's an avenue to have multi-generational park playing together. Other communities and internationally, this has been done throughout South America. It's done where everybody gets to use the park. It's a play for everybody. And I do think that we can do that and then have more adults and more kids and more families together, so mom and dad are playing, mom and dad aren't just sitting and watching the youngsters. I think that's another avenue. And then people who don't have any kids can also come out to the park. I think that's more inclusive. And that's kind of all my comments. Commissioner Ross, and I'll come back to Commissioner Tudor.
I agree with the programming. This really alleviates us having to hire staff to do things. If we can get vendors to come out and and provide programming for us. And as I've heard said, it occupies the space. The trick is finding the things that will entice our residents to come out. So we have to offer a range of things and see how they play out. Exercise equipment for all ages. There are, I think, areas in the park that maybe could have a grouping of something. So I would encourage dedicating some funds for that. With regard to North Miami PAL, that's a great idea. Jenny, and some of our new police hires have ties to North Miami, so maybe the chief could look into tapping into that.
They're excited about actually doing this, is what I'm hearing, so.
Okay,
Good. One thing that no one's mentioned, well, I gotta say tot lot resurfacing, because a lot of parents come to us with that request. And we know that that's gonna be about $40,000, something to consider. One thing that no one's mentioned is a parking surface. We're requiring the people park their cars not on the grass or dirt, and here around the park, for the most part, we have people parking on the grass and the dirt. We set aside $14,000 in this year's budget for that purpose, but we know that $14,000 maybe will just get us to a place where we can do groundwork for a surface, for something like turf block. So I think we need to dedicate some additional funds in next year's budget. Whether we get started on it now with what's allocated or not, it's gonna be more than $14,000.
Yeah.
And how can we go around requiring it of our residents and not do it ourselves? One last thought, and this is a long-term vision kind of thing, is to have, we have the Butterfly Park, and we have the park on Griffin Boulevard that's kind of become an art park with some pieces in it. To have themed medians, to encourage what we've already, build on what we already have in place, like an art park, but to have themed medians or other open spaces like a peace park, and maybe, we'll pick a median and pick it for a specific purpose with benches or chess boards, chess tables, something like that, so that people could say, hey, I'll meet you at the chess park. And just Friday afternoon, you come home from work and you chill out with your neighbor for a while. Something I think that is like community building, place building, and just a fun thing to do.
okay.
Well, actually, one of the primary things I was going to say, actually, Commissioner Ross beat me to the punch, was parking around the park. I know it was brought up at last year's during the budget, and I know some money was set aside, but just to reiterate what Commissioner Ross said, it's kind of hard to reach out to residents and say, hey, we want you to have skin in the game and do X, Y, and Z, but we're not going to do it here. So I would like to see money for parking surfaces around the park. As for the different services to offer, now that we have a public Parks and Recs director, I definitely would like to see, possibly, I don't know if it's possible to do a survey of the residents and find out, what do residents want? Because first and foremost, a park should be for residents. It doesn't seem like that it's always that way. It doesn't always feel that way. So I would like to see, find out from residents, what do they want to have here at the park for them. And I'd like to get back to some of the things that we did prior, the movie nights, the different things like that kind of bring in a sense of community around the park. And then I'd like to actually see if there's any, I know we have some green space around the village hall. I would like to see about even a possibility of developing some of that to make similar to what the park is over on Griffin, that small little area there. Just if we can develop something with that to try to draw in residents, something that residents might like.
That could be an art park, a dog park, or
Okay.
One last thing is we budgeted in the current fiscal for the lighting, that to match the grant from the foundation for the lighting at the entranceway, and that's sort of just gone dead in the water. One of the residents mentioned that it's kind of dark. We don't get the light from the pole, doesn't filter out here. Even though we don't have late night meetings here like we used to, I think that that would be a nice amenity for our residents, and then maybe something that we can grow on down the road.
And we may be able to do lighting that's not as light polluting, so we can do kind of about.
We're thinking of those bollards or low lighting.
There's two things that I want to hit on here real quickly, is the parking around the rec center and the lighting. And I think both of those can be done in phases, and I think we have to plan that.
Yeah.
We know that both of them are big expenses. If we plan, X amount of dollars for the next 4 years for those things, we can get it all done. It's just gonna take a little while, but we'll get there.
The one
But if
person we
if
should
don't
have
plan
asked,
it, it'll never happen. So.
one person we should have asked who left was Art, because Art runs parking lots, I believe. And he would probably know, what does it cost per square foot to put down asphalt just for a park, for a parking space?
We need to have a permeable space
We
there, so
don't
it's
have
not really
Oh,
asphalt.
that's right, we want,
It would
okay,
be
right, permeable.
Turf block.
Probably more turf block.
Turf block.
Caesar, have you gotten the prices on the turf block yet? Have you had a chance to do that?
I have reached out to a couple contractors, and I should be meeting them, I should be meeting with them this week, so I'll have an answer by the end of the week.
Didn't you talk to somebody about gravel a while ago?
No, it wasn't me about gravel. Last year, probably,
Last year?
yeah.
Okay, so is anything else on rec centers from up on the dais? Okay, Dan, you're up first.
I've spoken to the residents, and the residents want their park back. They want this park to be theirs. They don't want it to where it's outside people. I know we can't stop outside people from coming in. But residents want to be able to come to the park, be able to meet with their friends, play checkers, play, games. They want it just basically to have this park. Recreation is not, we're not supposed to be making money for the rec center. I mean, I don't know where it's got this impression we have to have revenue coming in. We have a budget that you guys put aside. I'm just using an example, $145,000. That $145,000 is supposed to be able to run this rec center for the residents. This is not supposed to be making money. We should be having movie nights. We had movie nights and we stopped because we wasn't making any money. Well, whatever the reason is, we're not supposed to be stopping it. I just think that we're not doing enough for the residents here. This is the residents' park. This is not outside people coming in here. I mean, but I know in 1993 we had to do it, had to be open. I don't know who decided to do that.
I think what you're asking, and maybe we can look into that, I did ask the attorney, and I never got an answer in terms of what the restrictions are, what do the grants actually require, and so I don't, I'm not.
We got 23,000 or something.
It's not the amount, it's what when we signed off on that money, what did we agree to? And I still, to this day, I've asked for that information from the previous administration. I'll ask again that we look into that and find out really what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of important.
Pay the money back, then let's pay the money back and close it. I mean, I've gone to other cities.
Doesn't quite work.
Yeah, well, part of the issue with the green space, the fields and stuff like that, is that there's actually been some court cases where you can't limit somebody who doesn't live in the neighborhood from using the green space, because that's an area where there's a free exchange of ideas, and so there's a violation right there. What some municipalities have done is, when they have the monies to do things like, for example, the tennis courts or community swimming pools, they're able to use resident-only money, and then they're able to, have it for residents only, and then, a guest has to pay, and they have to be accompanied by a resident, so they can do things like that. It's going to be, it is a tough thing to try to figure out how to, it's all going to come down to offering services that the residents want, and trying to just bring the residents back, because, we all pride Biscayne Park on being like a small town feel.
Right.
And most small towns have a, have a city center, a little, where everybody kind of can gather, and there's events and stuff like that. Well, we don't have a city center. This is our little meeting place, and I think that's what we have to do, is utilize that, so that, this is a place where, we see a lot more of that neighborhood feel.
Do we have any idea, what did the movie nights cost us? What was total expenses?
I don't remember.
It was, this is before we bought the projectors. It
Right.
was an average between 600 to 1,000, because I remember asking, 600 to 1,000 Now it only costs us about $300. And one of the ideas, I found out about this tonight, was that through my business, I want to, and I offered to a couple commissioners and to the city manager, that I would sponsor 2 movie nights, because all it would cost me would be for the price of the movie itself, which is about $300. So that's what it costs us now, about $300.
The
Plus staff.
The cost depends on the licensing, depends on the movie that you pick and the licensing for that movie.
Licensing, right.
We did purchase the projector equipment, so, and we have monies in the budget to do it. But we haven't had the leadership in place to get it done.
Yeah, I think
And now we're getting there.
if we get more people involved with just, oh yeah, let's go to the rec center, they're doing something, it'll help a lot of things, but
May I ask an ignorant question? If somebody has access to movies such as Netflix or things like this, is it illegal?
Yes.
yes.
I just want to make sure.
This is a public showing,
Right.
Okay, 'cause
and
it's
so we
public, okay.
can't just,
I
hop over
assume,
to
I
Redbox.
assume, I assume so,
Right.
but it was an ignorant question, because
Yeah,
I didn't
it's,
know.
It was
Even though
contentious.
we don't charge for it, it's still
Yeah.
illegal.
Just wanted to make sure, so,
It's all about licensing.
just want to make sure so everybody out there, because somebody else, I'm sure watching this later is going to ask the same question, so.
Well, truthfully, what we could do is actually show something like Casablanca. I think we get a lot of older people that would come and watch it again. I would,
Go on.
Auntie Mame,
right? Yeah, hey, look, if it
the
makes,
Rosalind Russell.
if people want to come and watch it, it's something to do. Just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry, it's Rosemary,
No,
I'm sorry.
Rosemary. All yours.
There were a lot of programs that were held. Movie nights, different events. But because we lost our rec manager back in January, everything came to a screeching halt. There were a lot of programs that were done through the rec board. There was a lot of programs that were put out by the Biscayne Park Foundation that they sponsored, and the rec board sponsored, ongoing. The vending machines were put in place a couple of years ago, because at one point, we used to buy the snacks and stuff, and then Issa would sell them, but it became cost prohibitive. The vending machines were brought in, they give us a percentage back, and I think Roxy remembers back when that took place.
It wasn't so much that it was a cost factor, it was that our auditors had a problem with the way we were collecting money and reporting money. And it was gonna become, they would have to have a special cash register, it was just gonna become so complicated for the little bit of revenue, $2,000 a year that they would get, that they went to a streamlined way of doing it.
And then we get a percentage back of the sales from the vending machine. So we could expand the vending idea to other things as well. But as far as events, Biscayne Park Foundation had put forth a year or so ago to put an exercise path, a Vito course. That's gone nowhere. It's a great idea. A lot of our residents like to walk. When I used to be here every day, you see them walking around and exercising.
I will tell you that the survey, what shocked me in the survey when Commissioner Ross and I were on the rec center board years ago, the survey that we did do a couple of presidential elections ago, what was the most shocking thing is the most requested use and the thing they wanted the most was the outside circle. By far, that had the greatest, I thought it was gonna be tot lot, we had all these ideas, but when it came down to it, what they wanted the most was the ability to place to walk safely. And I think that goes back to road safeties and some of the pedestrian issues.
And lighting.
And lighting. So the idea that they had a safe place to walk and
I had
exercise.
some
I've got to
comments
go.
about they would love to have a tennis court. Well, because of the layout of the park, it's difficult unless you use that baseball diamond that is totally not usable. And you can have that tennis court going north and south, it's all fenced, so you're not gonna have tennis balls hitting people's homes, it's all fenced in, it's a perfect place to do a tennis court. You either have a single or double.
Do you have
Because we don't have the volleyball anymore, that's
Yeah.
gone. That was a kitty litter box after a while. But there was a lot of events going, a potluck, rec board sponsored one at the meeting. We were gonna move that every 3 months to a different location. One was to do it here, but without the rec manager, everybody's hands were tied. Now that will change with Issa coming back, because he had a lot of programs. There were a lot of things that were being discussed before Salisha was gone, to do certain upgrades, and that just went nowhere. So we've been sitting for 7 months with stagnant, which will change when he's coming back.
I appreciate you moving so quickly on that.
And I will give him whatever help I can if he wants it. If not, oh, lighting.
May I quote you?
Lighting the pole, this just gets you laughing. That big pole outside with the street light was blocking the view when we were having meetings and you couldn't see. Well, somebody one day with the loppers trimmed the hedges so now the light would come down and he said a hissy fit. Who touched the trees? But now we kept the bushes low so the lighting would come in. Yeah. Good man.
I did it.
Get a
I'm
heart
sorry.
attack. Who cut those bushes?
I don't know if this falls under safety.
It was me.
Just for 1 second, because Bob was there, I'm trying to be fair. Bob?
No, I'm just wanting to say, another revenue stream that helped a little bit too is every time we have those food trucks in,
Oh, yeah.
we get a percentage.
That's right. All the major events, there were food trucks, 2 or 3 different kinds, whatever, yeah.
And
Yes.
they're used a lot.
Oh,
I will
yeah.
tell you that Dave Caserta and I had conversations, he's our lobbyist, and it was very interesting. He said that in North Miami, once they got that going, they could then get more permanent things in, and they found that as long as the trucks came in, it was regular enough, that concession people then might want to move into a permanent space. But it was an interesting perspective, and the idea that you can do different types of food trucks so that it's something that changes.
It depends on the food trucks that you pick.
Yeah.
Mac?
A couple of quick things. One is, it's kind of a, talk about all these ideas, it's kind of like a build it and they will come mentality, because we're talking about how to get people back here. That's stuff for us to do and we'll come back. You know, so when Dan and I first moved here, we came to a movie night, like we'd only lived here like a week or two. We were so excited. We brought a blanket, we laid down, we met neighbors for the first time. It was kind of cool. This is an idea I brought up at the PMP when I was on that board regarding the Village Hall green space. I think it'd be really cool, this is kind of a pie in the sky thing, but that's what we're here for, to put in a windmill park. So rather than to landscape it, put in a windmill park, see what that would cost and what kind of electricity that would generate. How cool would it be if you could generate electricity for the village and you didn't have electric bill anymore?
For the record, it's a fantastic idea.
It's really expensive, I don't know.
No, it's not that. It's just that Florida, believe it or not, doesn't have the wind to sustain. It's a lovely idea. You're just in the wrong state. If we could put tidal flow out there, that's kind of what they're moving for here. But solar is another option for us. Go
Okay,
ahead.
and then, this is a feel-good place. This is the center, you said it very well, it's the center of our kind of community here. It's a feel-good place. I think when you have a goal like the tot lot surface, I think, Rox, you brought it up. You guys are always looking for money. I think things like that, it would pull the community together, especially using this, to say, we need a new tot lot, and it's not in our budget, and we need $40,000 to do it. And we have an 8-month plan to do it, and we have a board that we developed that's in charge of it, and they're gonna have pancake breakfast at the thing, and all manner of things, and selling bricks for the walkway up to it, and I can go to local stores and get them to sponsor. There are all kinds of things you can do to raise money. Residents will donate, people will spend money, and all kinds of stuff. And that could be part of what this place is. I would love to see that. You have it here, my God, it's like this precious thing that's not utilized. It could give back to the community. It could pull us all together, and it could give back at the same time. It'd be a great place to do all of that. That's it.
So you mentioned solar, and since we have a flat roof on this rec center building, I always thought it would be a great idea to have solar panels, and maybe it would sustain the lighting around the walkway.
What might be kind of neat too is to do, if this is hot pie in the sky now, solar panels that lead out from here to the tot lot, so the parents have an access. And so it becomes, because we've done this in one of the schools where FPL actually installed it, so it creates a walkway. So that is your shade.
Structure.
It's a shade structure, and it doubles for sun. And you can do that from here, and you can also do that out there and put seating and stuff for people to play, whether it's the checkers board, and I'm a big chess fan, go.
It's been a
my
long
parents were
time
in New York.
since we've asked FPL for anything, and they have been supportive in the past of different projects.
This might be a really nice piece.
Yeah, it's establishing those partnerships is what we have to do. I think that's kind of dropped to the wayside, and there's other entities out there with much deeper pockets than what we have. Our pockets are pretty shallow, so that they can actually, developing those relationships may actually benefit us.
I will be shamelessly approaching.
And I think that's on our list, so we just covered it.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we're probably tight. Yep.
One of the programs that the foundation was talking about was having like a bingo night. Carry that on another step. Quarterly, you could have bingo night. Another, you could have game night where you set up chessboards. And this would be a permanent every, once a month, once every 2 months, set up the timing so that the residents know that, okay, tonight's bingo night, or tonight's gonna be Chester checkers night. That could be a permanent thing set up by the rec center instead of a board.
And having something that's on a more regular basis, or that residents, know what's coming. Oh, hey, it's the first weekend of the month or whatever.
And
Because
that's part of programming.
yeah, and it all comes down, and now with the Parks and Rec director, I think that with you working with them, that'll be one of those things. But I think that's one I noticed beforehand. I get an email about something, and it didn't seem consistent. It's like, oh, well, now they're doing this, and it's like, so it all comes down to the programming, consistency.
Anything else in the audience? Okay, so we've kind of touched on fiscal sustainability. We've also done the Recs and Cultural Service. I think I may bounce a little bit here because there's a lot of municipal services and operations. I think what I'd like to do for that one is just have the manager, since that really is your area, go through that quickly since we're running out of time, and then come back to, if everybody agrees, to community aesthetics. So if you could take over municipal services and strengthening organizational capabilities, okay, and talk about those issues and our needs, because those are serious needs for the village.
Okay.
That have fiscal components to them.
Yeah. Essentially, just the general overview on that is we want to, of course, increase the efficiencies using technology. We've discussed that tonight pretty thoroughly. Digital records for all departments, building code and finance, uniform contracts and standardized clauses wherever we can do that. A lot of our contracts are very different for very different services, so there's different aspects of them that really can't be standardized, but where we can, we want to do that. And monitoring of contracts. And I think currently what's happening is our contracts, we get them signed, we get the resolution signed, they go in a nice binder, and then we remember them down the road after they've expired. And so it'll be a way of keeping a closer eye on those so that we are staying up to date with those. We want to update the human resources policies and procedures as well for the village. Department procedures manuals, we talked on that a little bit. We want every desk to have one so that, of course, cross-training is optimal, but should 2 people be out on the same day, then we still want to be able to go to a manual and have that desk continue to function. It's just a sustainability option for that. The building department, we'd like to see permitting online, that capability, and that is capable through there is a possibility through BS&A system that we have, yes.
Okay.
And so additionally, merchant services, so that we can accept credit cards at Village Hall. We do way too much cash for a municipality. I mean, and certainly we'll always accept cash, but cash checks are our only options right now, so I do want to increase that. Also master permitting, that's something that we'll be working
We
on.
piecemeal that now, correct?
I'm sorry?
If I'm not mistaken, I spoke to Ray, we do we allow for piecemeal. We allow a little of this, first the demolition, first this, and so we're talking about.
We do, yeah.
So the master plan would take that more as a procedural piece.
Yeah, well, it just organizes it.
Right,
So
and will
that-
prevent some of the stuff we're seeing now.
Right.
Okay.
Construction regulations and policies, such as the fencing and that sort of thing that, aren't clearly addressed in our code. And then, increasing code enforcement as well as, the building department enforcement for inspectors and building official, and increasing the depth of knowledge there. So then code enforcement, in a perfect world, I'd love to see us hire someone to rewrite the entire code so that it's consistent. I've always said we have Franken code. We've stolen an arm from here and a leg from there and created a monster. And so I would love to see that. That's not going to be an inexpensive venture, but that's something that perhaps we should look forward to.
I think we budgeted $20,000 this year for that, if I'm not mistaken, or was that in contingency? Commissioner Ross, do you recall?
I don't think that we budgeted for it.
Okay, okay, we did, okay. I know we talked about it during the budget season, maybe didn't make it.
Yeah, I remember in the workshop, but I don't.
And additionally on code, I'd like to see a part-time code officer come in to back up Elizabeth. I think that would be a huge help. We've got the admin backup on the inside now, so the back end is happening. It's getting into the computers, that sort of thing. Elizabeth is spending her time out in the field for the most part, but it's not enough. And so, you know, she still has to take days off or, you know, has a personal day here and there, that sort of thing. And I think another part-time code officer would be helpful there. And actually have someone in mind for that. So. And Public Works, I do think an RFP for tree trimming services would be beneficial, and I think that would be more cost effective in the long run than putting our guys, you know, up in lifts and cutting trees. I think we take on a lot of. Our guys are great. There's pretty much nothing they can't do if you know give them the tools they need to do it. But it takes to take a tree down. It takes 5 guys, you know, and there's other things that they need to be doing as well. So I think that would be the better option, would be to hire professional tree trimming services. And then finish cleaning up the Public Works building, repainting it. I'd like to see that all freshened up again. So.
Can you, Janie, if you could just, we're just kind of round robbing it and then we come back to the audience if that's okay?
Okay, sure.
Great, thank you so much.
And so, and then, you know, a little money on communications and transparency. I would really like to redo our website. Redo our website, and just do a complete rebuild on that. And we've met with Marlon and I met with the company that we're currently working through on the website. And they've given an estimate of, you know, $5,000 to $7,000 to redo it all. But we want to make it more user friendly. We want to make it more user friendly for a newsletter, like an e-newsletter. I'd love to start producing that. That would be a tool, as well as make it easier to do e-blasts so we can communicate more readily with residents.
So website. Okay, and then if you could just quickly go over strengthening organizational capabilities, if you have anything down on that.
Pretty self-explanatory. All departments. we are working with all departments on this and reviewing both departments. You know, how to increase their efficiencies. Making sure. I mean, the first thing we have to make sure is that the people are trained and they have the tools they need. And that's sort of my way of management, is get competent, trained people in place, give them the tools they need, and let them go. And, you know, I think that has always served me well with the people I've managed, and to an extent here, I think it will as well. We have some really great people here.
I'm going to allow just to jump to the audience just because it's getting late and I want to make sure the people who came here are still here and who came late. So I'm going to, Janie, I think your wife beat you first. Jen.
My passion, as soon as I hear additional part-time code officer, you can sort of tell as you drive around the city, people have sort of figured out our code officer schedule. You know when things are going to go down, and Sunday is one of the biggest days that we can seriously use coverage. And I know everybody kind of looks, and it's very hard. Everybody's got their priorities. We've all got our little personal desires and wants. But code is that one thing that pays for itself long-term in property value increases. I'm not talking price, I'm talking any of that. I'm talking aesthetics, quality of life, and Sunday, I have to say, is one of the biggest days. You see a lot going on. So if we could get somebody covering those days, I think we'd see such a payback.
Just for the record, since everybody's going to see
I'm
this,
sorry.
they may be surprised the days that they think are uncovered. I'm just going to share that. Not always what they think. Go ahead.
When you brought up that you want to get a credit card, they will accept credit cards.
Merchant services?
We used to. We used to have that for years. I don't know whatever happened to it. It was over at the log cabin where the glass partition is. It was right there to pay your bills. Contractors were using it a lot.
Really? When I was here before, it wasn't in play at that point, so I don't know.
It went away.
I think Caesar may have some insight there.
It sort of maybe it grew legs or something, but we bought the little card reader.
Really?
Susan, you have insight to that?
We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Okay. I think that kind of covers most of the operational things.
Can I toss something in there?
Sure, go ahead, Nick.
I loved hearing the idea of another code officer, and I think it should be full-time. I think that this village is so special, and the opportunity here is so enormous, and I agree with Janie Anderson 1,000,000%, that the one thing that's gonna separate us from the surrounding communities is code enforcement. And I think we deserve and can pay for another full-time code officer plus an inside person to help both full-time outside code officers in the return you'll get from tax revenue when the property values go up. I think it's a real no-brainer. And since Christian brought up construction regulations, I have to bring up porta potties. I've never gotten an answer whether
They
they're
have
on
been cited as unsightly objects.
I'm sorry?
They have been cited as unsightly objects.
Lovely. I'd like to see that written into the code that they have to be out of sight. I don't care that, I know they have to be in the front yard, but behind a fence, whatever.
They can
But,
put screening.
yeah, screen in something, but sitting out on the curb,
You gotta work with me. You can get 32 emails to me before I can get the code changed sometimes, so just give me some time, Mac. That's all I'm asking.
Mac is very prolific in his writings, yes. Okay. We can go ahead and if everybody agrees, I don't think.
Three comments in this category.
Oh, I'm so sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so, number one, I think that we're gonna get the best bang for our buck in tree trimming services if we tie into economies of scale, and if we're able to piggyback off of what some other cities are paying, what their contracts are. Because they're so much larger and they use it so much more, we're gonna, it's how we got Raydell, whether maybe there could have been some, more detail in what they were doing, and that would have been on us to be there while they were trimming and making sure that they're doing it to our liking. But we're such a small place. We're gonna get a better price. So I'd recommend that you reach out to your fellow managers and see what services they're using, or maybe this Caesar or PW could reach out to other cities' PW and see what they're doing. You're gonna get a better result, I think. I really, really, truly would love to see us move away from the individual contracts for inspectors and move towards standardizing our building department with an operation that can run all the inspections for us. We're already halfway there, so I'd like to just move it all the way. And then, not so much with municipal services, but it's a municipal responsibility. We have something called a comprehensive plan that we're supposed to look at and revamp, assess where we are, what we've accomplished, and where we want to go. That's supposed to happen every 7 years. The last time that happened, the process started in '08, and it was like a 2-year process to get it done. So we need to, I think, set aside some money in our budget for planners to help us through that process. The evaluation, it's called an evaluation and appraisal report, to update our comprehensive plan.
I do want to add on the contracts as well, and I know you and I have talked about this regarding the building department and the code department. One of the challenges we face because we are so small is we don't have the expertise that we need, and as a result, we will continue to make either errors or not do things as efficiently and consistently as we need to. I know we are in process of changing for building. I know we talked about this, whether a municipality can help us for tree trimming services or building or whatever. I think we could look at places that are already working, and we may be able to piggyback not just off of private vendors, because we have had some vendors here, and I will say some of them I'm not very pleased with the product. So we maybe also should not rule out another municipality and paying them to do the services that they already have that economy of scale. I'm not saying that's the way we have to go, but I think it's something we should consider, because if they have the institutional knowledge, they understand the regs, they understand what we can and cannot do. The great example is when we met with a couple of different people, I learned so much more than I ever knew about building and laws that are already on the books, so we didn't actually have to invent our own. And that saves us money. So I think we can look into municipal services as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add, just give me 1 minute. I support the issue on the website. I think that's an issue that is going to come up anyway, and I fully support us making our website much more user-friendly, as well as the communication for the elected officials to be able to rule out so that we're not playing the bounce-back game of 90 emails. In case I had planned on sending out all these emails, and every time I do, I get anywhere from 50 to 70, 90 emails. I have to keep cleaning up my email list manually. So we need to work on that piece to make it easier for residents to communicate with individual emails, but if we want to communicate blasting. And the other thing is, I believe we have about 400 people on the website. We have 3,000 residents. I think we can do a whole lot better than that. If we want people to come out to events and do things, we need to have a signing up and a kind of tell all your neighbors, and if you're watching this, please go onto the website and sign up for e-blasts. We don't send that many out, but it's a great way to communicate, and I think we need to do a better job of making sure residents are signed up for that. And that's it for me. Anything, Dan?
For me was, I'll just piggyback off the big thing for me is website, which is a way to communicate with residents, making services more readily available to residents. This is maybe more of a question for Christian, but do we have or do we maintain any type of, similar like a municipal service, public safety thing, a list of residents who in times of need, let's say a natural disaster or something like that?
Vulnerable residents?
Yeah, that.
We do.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you about that. Thank you.
We have to be careful about that because every municipal record is a public record, so we don't necessarily maintain a list like that.
I don't really have anything to add. I think Manager Manners touched on most things. I mean, the standardized contracts, I'm for. The website also, I agree that it needs to be redone so it's more user-friendly. It's something that we as elected officials can use to communicate with the residents and vice versa maybe. So I definitely agree with that. As far as help with code, yes, I do agree with that. And the construction regulations and policies, our last commission meeting, I brought some language in, so I hope we do move forward for that because there definitely is a need. And Mac, I hear you. I think we're all in agreement with that, and that's pretty much.
The only thing I forgot about was permit fees and best practices. I know we touched on that, you and I individually, but for the record, I think we need to look at our permits to make sure they're reasonable so people take them out, and things that are more in best practices. So some of them will be lowered, some of them may be raised, but right. I'll tell you some of the stuff that we're charging now and some of the things we're doing it. To use your analogy, since you use the vernacular, if you're changing out a toilet and you're putting on a seal, I won't use the word that you used, but in reality, you don't need an inspector for that. There's nothing an inspector is going to do by coming in your house and looking and go, yep, you did the seal. You don't need to charge for that. These are things that, and that's just an example that was used. There are things that you need permits for and things you do not, and then we need to look at what they are for repairs. If it's under $1,000 or whatever the amount that we decide, then you don't need a permit for that. So I think we need to go back to common sense, permitting, and best practices in terms of what we're charging, and just take a look at our fee structure a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, and Manager Manners, you and I also started talking about that as well, because, I also think that obviously there will be people out there that don't comply and don't pull permits, but we want to encourage people to do the right thing, and I think a lot of times people see the fees for a small job that they're doing, and
sure. And I hear those stories where someone has a $200 job and they have to come in and buy a $300 permit to get it done.
Right.
And that is prohibitive, and that does actually encourage people to avoid the process.
Exactly.
So we can definitely take a look at the fees.
Okay. Some of the last things, and they're very important, so I didn't mean to leave them for last, but I know we talked about community aesthetics a little bit here. So I know you had some idea of community aesthetics. Do you want to share yours?
No.
No?
I'm ready to go. Yes, sure, I'll share that. We've been talking about medians, and we've been talking about doing some end caps. There's the Parks and Parkway Committee put together a lovely native arrangement of plants around our entry signs, and we were thinking that maybe it would be really nice to do that as end caps on the medians. They're drought resistant. Once you get them established, you don't have to provide the irrigation for them that you would a lawn or something like that, or grass. So that may be something to look at, and just doing some more landscaping. Also wanted to get the the 4 remaining entry signs installed and landscaped as well. And I think we've got some money for that in the budget this year. I'll have to double check that. But, you know, we've got the signs, so it's just a matter of getting that done. And lifting and maintaining the tree canopy, which I think we've talked about a few times.
I think you already worked on some of the things that I asked for, which was cleaning up public works. I think we need to continue on that realm. I'd also like to see when we paint this building, that we get away from the institutional beige and move into something that is a lot more colorful. And that includes the inside of this place too. I agree with Mac. I think everybody's kind of in agreement that the rec center could use a bit of a makeover, and so maybe we can look at GoFundMe or other sources or volunteers and come up with something so phase-wise we can move towards making the rec center in this place, the center that you spoke of, because I agree with Will on that as well. Those are some of the other things that I want to add. Will, you want to go ahead? Is there anything else you want to add on that?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the medians as well. I do like the idea of maybe repeating the foliage that is on our end caps with the signage, because I'd like to see Biscayne Park, and I know, Mac, you're going to like this when you drive into Biscayne Park, that you know that you're here. And I think we can do that with the medians if there's sort of a theme to our medians. I do also like the idea, and I think it's already been mentioned up here, with maybe, and I thought about it before, maybe having residents where you can dedicate something if they give money to one of the medians, like whether it's a bench or something, some signage, buying a brick or whatever, to help raise money to do the work in the medians. But what I think needs to happen, and I don't think there's really a cost to this, correct me if I'm wrong, is that I think we need to just start to plan what we'd like to do in the median so that we can start to roll it out. And I think that touches back on what I mentioned earlier in our meeting about our financial forecasting, and we can kind of see what we can do, but we've got to have a plan in place. So I think we need to start talking about that so that we can start to realize these things.
And that also goes with the roads, because the end caps, the planting, and the roads, and the repairs on those edges all need to kind of happen together, so that will have to be coordinated anyway. Commissioner Rock, do you think?
I really like the idea of foliage at the end caps, also with some kind of curbing, like we put it up for the signs, because that would protect those end caps from people, driving across them. But you got to be careful with maintenance issues. You don't want to put something in there that's going to be very high maintenance, and avoid growth that would obstruct the visibility at those corners. Putting up the 4 remaining community signs, I'd like to see them up as well, but you're going to find some challenges in placing them in the right of way, particularly in those narrow streets. I'm thinking 7th Avenue for one, because it's not that wide of a street, and so you're going to place it very close to someone's property line, and may need some help with. I know the first 4 were placed where we had an engineer come and design where that pad was going to be. So you may need to have that kind of advice.
Yeah, and one of them, because I went to every street for the 4, because we did have one of the residents who does have that background and has offered to help supervise that for free. So I did go around and look at some of this, and I will tell you one of the problem streets is 6th Avenue. There's just no way that wide sign is going to fit there, even though it's designated to go there. It's too wide. And so
also, we need to have FDOT sign off on it.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think that's realistic. And we might, by pulling out some of the other signs that we have, we may be able to swap locations. So if you have a thin sign, this is welcome to Village Biscayne Park, you might be able to use that. So there may be some, redistributing of resources. The only other thing that I want to, first of all, I want to shout out to the police and the police chief for, how should I put it, making our medians green through orange stickers. We seem to have a lot of people now off the medians. We're seeming to have a lot of success with that. And I think that will help with some of the aesthetic issues in maintaining them. I think we do also have to look at aesthetically addressing the reflector issue, maybe through vegetation, low-growing vegetation, and give alternatives to that. And the last one is actually related in an indirect way, which is the driveway and / parking ordinance that we're working on currently. As we move forward with that, and we ask the homeowners to invest in swales, we have to find a situation to help them out on situations where they're gonna have some, especially around corners. So I think we need to come up with some solutions for that at the same time when we work on the ordinance, so that if you're gonna ask somebody to invest, they don't turn around and watch that investment go out, and especially with the siding areas. And that's all I have on that.
Tracy,
Yes, Bob?
when you were talking about the vegetation on the end caps of all the streets coming into the city, Parks and Parkway already has a plan for that.
I think we're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe because I've had these conversations behind closed doors, but these, as you're going through the avenues, which is a lot of our through streets, there's a lot of very nice sized medians where those end caps could be improved.
Right, but what they have, I know they have a set of plans for the entrance coming into the city.
Right, but this would be
So
the
they
other
already-
areas,
Right, but they already have that part.
and we could like
But
phase it.
That's sort of like what they have around the current entrance signs?
It's a mixture, it's
It's a mixture.
different types of plans and stuff. You know, I don't remember exactly what they, but I know they went ahead and looked at all the streets and they drew up the plan.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the end caps or if it was the
That's fine
canopy.
with them.
Yeah,
I mean, it may be a problem with the height or maybe with the maintenance, but at least see what they've already.
I know they had a plan for the tree canopy, and not so much the understory that I don't,
No, this was the other.
the understory, okay,
It was
maybe.
just
you're-
the end caps.
Okay.
It wasn't for the whole meeting.
Okay, I'm unaware of that, so thank you.
Can I
No.
say a couple of things about medians? I was on BNP and we talked about this a lot, and I feel very strongly that they are such a potentially beautiful part of this village. I mean, they really, again, make us so different. I think a really good step in the right direction would be really easy, is just to clean them out, because you have a hodgepodge of crap down the middle of medians where someone came out and put a bunch of orange bromeliads that are half dead to keep people from crossing in, and someone else put a bunch of areca. It's a hodgepodge mess. It's better to start by just create a clean palette, let the grass grow back in, and figure out what you're gonna do. But in the meantime, get rid of the crap. It looks like mom and pop kettle, decorated our medians. Just get that crap out of there, and just let them be plain grass medians until you come up with a plan, because they look terrible in the meantime. It might be interesting to pick one median and do a test run and say, this is kind of our plan for medians, and get feedback from people. I think you'd find a lot of support when all of a sudden one of them looks really cool, like, wow, let's figure out a way to make that happen. And I think that's a fundraising opportunity as well. This is probably a question for Christian, can you get people to sponsor, are businesses allowed to sponsor things in the village, like landscape companies this median sponsored by blankety blank landscape company, who came in per your specs, designed it, put it in, you have to maintain it, but they do it and they get a sign there that says to advertise their landscaping business. Are you allowed to do things like that?
I think we could probably do something like that with approval on the signage and all of that. We have to have.
One of the concerns I have is we have tremendous amount of sign pollution right now. We have businesses that have signs all over the village. We have homeowners putting out signs. We actually took down years and years ago, there was a lot of do not parking signs,
Right.
and there was sign pollution, so they pulled them out. So I do think we have to.
I won't disagree with that, but there's a cost benefit.
Let me finish my thought for a minute, okay? So whether we could consider something that's less obtrusive looking, like a plaque, or something that's
That's right.
not, hey, my business did this.
Doesn't have to be up here.
Right,
Right.
so
Yeah.
something that's less obtrusive, I personally would have less of an issue with.
Yeah, it could be, like Jenny said, a bench, and it could be next to the bench.
Right,
This
or-
median sponsored by blank. I'm just always thinking of ways, I don't know.
No, and it's,
I'm just always thinking of ways to get someone else to pay for something.
and it's funny that you said that, like, I was driving to work and it was around a roundabout, and it was like, this roundabout the median was done by the Rotary Club, and the sign is there, and
It's just like
Rotary
this
Club
lot.
dedicated.
Instead of trying to figure out where you can find the money in your budget,
Mhm.
figure out who else you can get to pay for something. And then the last thing is, when you do the entrance, the 4 remaining entrances, be very careful and mindful of the lighting. The lighting on the 4 that you have now is basically terrible. The solar panel things are horrific, and the lights aren't even hitting the signs properly. It's terrible. They're hitting the bottom of the sign. It's not even properly, and the signs are so cool, and they're not properly illuminated. It's like a white hot spot right below the name of the village. It's like, come on now. Someone needs to hook that up a little bit and put a lower wattage bulb in it, and they're beautiful. But
the
just
issue-
those little details, matter.
On the issue of signs, let's be really careful what we put up, because if we can't really regulate, and if we start putting up signs, which basically is advertisement, then we open the door for anyone else who wants to put up signs.
And that's my concern.
And we can't regulate what the sign says. They'll be allowed to put up whatever their desire, so,
Really?
yeah.
Even if you come up with a contract that they sign saying, we're willing to do this, and we know the limitations of the sign? If they come in knowing?
It opens the door for other people to put up signs who don't contract with you.
People can come into the village and just place a sign
No,
somewhere?
it'd have to be on there, it couldn't be in the right of way, but still.
But there is a concern with some of that.
This should be a sign because you donated
Yeah.
something, not just because you probably put a sign up.
I think that's to be continued. I think it's a definitely conversation about how to get something paid for at the same time.
This may be designed by so-and-so, a little plaque,
Yeah.
courtesy of.
I think that's something to, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
For the older residents, been here for a long time, there are ball fields where we had a movie filmed out
I
there.
remember that. Yep.
We had the scoreboard and the thing.
Right.
We sold,
Right.
people could have signs up there. We had real estate signs, we had
Right.
a number of different signs.
This is something that
Went
was
all over.
enacted by the legislature with the, last year. So, and then a court case came down from it, related to the same issue.
I've seen it lots of places, lots of communities you see that.
I'm gonna just table it for now. It's all the input. We can come back at that in a little while. Is there anybody else on community aesthetic issues that you can think of?
Y'all touched everything.
I just want you to continue on cleaning up the only other community aesthetic I'm gonna talk about is code related. I'm gonna see if I can do this gently. We have some people operating businesses. And as such, even though we have regulations for it, I think we need to really step up enforcement. Where you have people coming every day with vehicles, not just the work vehicles, but the workers are coming and parking 5, 6, 7, 8 vehicles. You have situations where people are just trying to hide the fact that they have chemicals everywhere, okay? And I think we need to start looking seriously about when we say a home business, what do we mean? And then if it's exceeding that, make sure we stop it, because that is a visual blight on the community.
Tracy, the code already has it in there for home businesses.
I said,
It just needs to be enforced.
yes, that's what
Yep.
I just,
Stops the code, when that code was written, it was written for somebody, I'm an insurance agent, so I'm working out of my house. I don't have customers, because I can't have customers coming to my house. The way
Right.
that code is.
or workers.
I can't have deliveries and workers, et cetera. I mean, the code stops all of that. It just lets people, if they work on their computer as a business out of their house, to make it legitimate, where they can have business cards with their address.
Just to be clear, we are having, I know of at least 4 or 5 right now that I've already discussed with the city manager, where we have situations like this, and it's creating a problem for the neighbors. It just is.
Businesses running in homes?
Are these sites that have home business permits?
To my knowledge, no. But 2 I haven't asked on. So some of them, the answer is no, but the other couple, we're still looking at.
Does that include Biscayne Park School?
I'm not going to specify what the issues are. I don't want to name anybody or call anybody out. I'm just saying that because we're doing big picture thing.
I said, I didn't know we had a school in
We do have a
Biscayne
school
Park.
on 116th, yes.
Really quick, I don't know what they're called, but I've emailed you guys about the concrete parking bumper thing that you find in commercial parking lots. They're all over our swales. They look horrible. Those are elements of commercial parking spaces, not residential, and they're lining some of the streets and they look just terrible.
I do recall seeing an element.
I don't know what they're called. I mean, I don't even, are they allowed? I asked a couple of people and I couldn't get, no one knew. And I searched the code.
Parking stops.
Parking stops?
Anybody else? Yes, Rosemary.
You might want to think about ago, before you took down a log cabin to renovate, there used to be benches around the outside where you could swoop. My understanding, Linda Dillon donated, the gun club donated three
Yeah.
or 4 benches for the park. And I think they're sitting over at PW, but I think they need to be repaired, I'm not sure about that. But putting some park benches around in some of the medians and around the village hall, and you've got 2 in front of here, it's nice. It's a way to stop cars going through the medians if you put a couple of benches. But it would be a nice touch in some of our medians and some of our public places to put some benches.
The other side of that argument is we've actually had at least one resident that I know of demand that a bench be removed from the median because kids would hang out there at night and, she thought it was disturbing. Just, we gotta consider.
Around Village Hall,
We've got
around
all
Log
kinds of
Cabin,
different benches, 'cause it
around
was in public
public
works at the time.
places, and then ask,
There's benches that are designed for just sitting up, not laying down.
And we also might be able to use them in the park and other areas, so if we have some, we could look at that. We have them already. Because that's revenue neutral at this point. I think we covered, I'm trying to think if there's anything we missed on the list. Other than long-term, the only other thing that I will talk about is that there's a section on assets and constraints. What were the assets for doing some of the short-term thing? I think everybody's touched on community members being an asset. I think that's one of the strongest features we have in the park, is we do have a very strong community. I think our constraints, of course, is millage rate and the upcoming $200,000 hit we may take very shortly. Is there anything anybody else wants to add on assets and constraints? And I think we underutilize our folks. Finally, the setting the long-term priorities, we didn't talk about that, but we really did. So we did talk about some infrastructure needs. If there's anything, I think we talked about roads already. We talked about drains, and there may be future stormwater requirements and sewer requirements and stuff. I know that's a long way off, but that is long-term goals. For capital improvement needs, we've already talked about energy efficient lighting. I think we've touched on that, correct? All right. We talked about the rec center already and some of the things that we want to do. You already brought up for developing municipal partnerships. With that comes an increase in institutional knowledge, which I think will help us a lot in cross-training and new staff members, which you've already touched on. Is there anything I missed that we hadn't already talked about in long-term priorities? Yes.
Someone did mention a capital improvement plan. I really would like to see us work towards that with the
Forecasting, right.
with the finance director. With regard to developing municipal partnerships, for a short time there, maybe even more than a short time, we had a very strong relationship with the Tri-Village, El Portal, Miami Shores, and us. And there were a couple of chamber events that were held at rotating through the 3 villages. Many of our residents came out for that. Many of our residents are members of the chamber, and I think it's important to keep that relationship going. It's a way of developing programming that is inviting for residents. So.
Right, we had, that's a great thing, I just had a recent conversation with Megan on, we had 2 people, and also Alice Birch, they reached out to us for 2 things. One is, and I may have her on to spearhead this along with Mike, and anybody else who was interested, was coming up with bike rides for the 4-county area. That could be community bike rides and family bike rides. Also, the other thing that was mentioned, and I'll just tell you everybody that I've been asked to meet with, and I haven't even had a chance to set up the meeting with you. There's a group that wants to put in bicycles that are for rent, and so they come at no cost to the village. They're like $1 for half an hour. They're very inexpensive, but the idea of creating a continuity between the communities. And so that's something as well that might be in it. It's of no cost to the village. Okay.
Like the B-cycle programs.
Right, right. But there's another vendor that they're using, and so I'll share that with you. And I was supposed to call them yesterday and didn't, so it's on my list for tomorrow.
I know Alice Birch was looking to put something like that in
Right.
Barry.
Yeah, and they have, and they want to put it here as well. And I think for our community, since there's so many bikers, and it might be kind of nice, people who wouldn't necessarily own a bike might be willing to rent it. And whether or not it's feasible or viable for the actual vendor, they seem excited to do it. I guess it's called Uber on your feet. I don't know. And I think that's all I want to add for that. Is there anything else? I think we did assets and constraints, or assets, of course, are CITT funds and maybe some county funds for roads, in addition to our community volunteers. But I think our constraints are going to be for any capital improvement project, unless we have grants or federal funding or state funding, some of these things are out of reach. And I think that is our challenge. The previous commission did put together some plans and so forth, but a lot of this is going to come down to what we can afford and what we can realistically do, or how we phase it in and do pieces of it at a reasonable level within our own fiscal constraints.
Can we make comments about the long-term?
Sure.
I probably should have prepared this, because I think this is a really important topic, but I was kind of winging it. You guys have been in your positions long enough that you can now have a meeting like this, so this is great. Now you can prioritize things. But they're all very task-oriented, they're all organized, and now you can prioritize and figure out all the things you're gonna do, and that's great. So I commend you for doing this. But I think the fundamental first step still hasn't taken place, and that is creating a vision for what this place is. And I'll hesitate using the word brand, because it really turns some people off. We're not a business, we're a community. Well, brand applies to lots of things. First, you have to know what you are, and it's an aspirational thing. What do we really want to be, and aim towards getting there? What are we? Really, what do we want to be? What is this place, this community, our home? It's a business too, I guess. And then you can figure out how to get there. So these are all steps to get somewhere, but you haven't yet decided where you're gonna go. I kind of feel like the 5 of you are in a van and you're going on vacation, and someone's driving and there's 4 navigators, but you haven't decided on where you're gonna go yet.
Just for the record, this meeting tonight is not a sustainability plan. It's not a fiscal, it's not a strategic plan.
Understood.
Just for the record, so
Understood.
everybody.
I know that's not what it is, because it's not what it is. What I'm saying is, I think that needs to happen. And I think it needs to happen very soon, because you can't say, we're gonna go somewhere, if you don't know where, if you don't have a destination in mind, then you're driving aimlessly, and you're gonna kind of wander and hit dead ends and back out of them, and you'll get things done, but they won't be getting you done, they won't be moving you in the direction that you necessarily need to go.
What you want is a 3 to 5 year strategic plan is what you're looking
Not
for,
even that,
but that's,
no.
but that.
That's still very task-oriented. What I'm talking about is a vision, defining what this place is.
Mac, that's what a strategic plan is for municipality. And I'll give you some of them, I'll send you some to read. And I've already read through a ton of them to see.
Okay.
I've also talked,
Well,
let me finish.
Then, as long as we're talking about the same thing.
It's the same thing that what you're saying.
But without that, you really can't get anywhere. You'll just get things done, but you won't get us towards the goal of being the best that we can be here, really being what we need to be. And only the 5 of you really get to decide what it is we're gonna be. So I think you need to define that first.
I'm gonna disagree with you on 2 things that you said. One is that by getting things done, I will share with you that a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for anybody is got you have your fiscal boundaries that you have to live within. And to do that, you have to then define the specific things you want to get done. I think you can make a 3 to 5 year plan with the visioning. You can do the values of the community, and I'll give you plans to look at. I'll put them out for people to see what they look like. But at the end of the day, you still have to get down to the nitty gritty of what money you have and what you're going to spend it on. So where I don't agree with is the idea that somehow we could have. I think sometimes we tend to want to be bigger than what we are. And personally for me, I think that's a valuable experience, deciding what the community is and the values of the community, and I think we can do that, and I don't think that's a hurtful exercise. I think it's a good one.
Values, because that makes it sound like a really nebulous, warm and fuzzy kind of a thing. It's to pretend you're a business. A business has to define what their brand is. They have to say, this is what we are in the market. Now, it's different. It's different for a municipality, but it's the same no matter what your product is, whether it's a city or a soda or hair products, which is the business I'm in. You have to have a vision for really what you want to be and say, that's what we are, or you're never going to get in that direction. Because you keep saying 3 to 5 year plan with tasks and blah, blah, blah. That's great. But the tasks have to move you towards the goal, or they're just tasks.
So the,
Hold on,
so the
Jenny.
comprehensive plan and the process of evaluating it, assessing where you've come from, and then projecting what you want to do in the next 7 years, that's gonna involve, it's gonna require that kind of
That's
exploration.
done as part of the process.
And so it will be part of the process.
I feel this is all very, this is great, but it's all very task oriented and it's not moving you towards the goal.
Right.
Jenny?
I think that what happened was we were at a point where the budget's being structured. We wanted to make sure that the people compiling the budget had an idea of what the commission is supportive of. But we definitely do need to go through a more extensive process. And for example, I went to North Miami's, one of North Miami's sessions, and the clerk could speak much more about it than I did, because I think you had like maybe
North Miami
8
Beach.
meetings to do your,
North Miami Beach, no.
North Miami Beach, to do your planning, your long-term plan. And it went through different phases. I don't know that we're gonna be able to do 7 or 8 phases, you know, with the community input and all of that, but I think maybe we could do an abbreviated version of some lead workshops that could take us to a statement. And we tried like heck, David did, to expand our brand. It's a difficult thing to do.
You know,
Excuse me, Matt, if you don't mind, please allow Jamie, because she's been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Jamie.
Okay. In a perfect world, I would agree with you a billion %. We've done that exact sort of thing before. We did it back in 2004, 5, somewhere in there. And everybody gets excited when we do all this, and then we get in the head with property revenue losses. So it's like we're spinning wheels, getting people turned on, and we got to get on the thing, we fix it with the media.
But Jenny, every
So-
business
Matt,
is hit
just
by
please.
things. I mean, that's true. We could have a conversation.
Control things and completely different ways in municipalities. I'm so happy.
Shall we pick our priorities?
Yes.
Okay.
Solid.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to
Jamie,
designate,
I'm gonna just close this. This is not gonna get us where we have to go. We have time constraints. I'm gonna ask, did you have one more comment that you want to make? Just a quick one, please.
Are we all done?
Quick one, and we're gonna actually do priorities.
I just wanted to go ahead and
Make
fill in on
something
that.
at the very end.
30 seconds, please.
Okay, dig out the sketches and stuff from the visiting session back, the charrette that we had. Take a look, because we did all that, went through it.
I remember.
Expensive mess,
I remember.
and then it just felt.
But many
it
of
got
those
buried.
things became part of the EAR, and then they were goals that were set up and incorporated in the
But
comprehensive
there's a
plan.
lot more that didn't, and there's a lot more that I don't, maybe you that was there, but there's everybody else that's sitting up there probably doesn't even know about it.
Okay.
About Biscayne Commons, the plants, the designing of, where the city hall is now, came out of that, that location.
Never, I will just say that I don't think these exercises are bad, but tonight's not the time, and now's not the time, so we can continue this later. I have no problem with bringing this type of thing back up later, as you can bring it up, or any other commissioner can, or as a resident. But we're gonna focus on priorities, because I would like to see what we can get done for this evening. It's getting very late.
So we have 3 colors. Here's what I suggest. Green is money. So you pick your money priorities, and then you pick your second place priorities, and then you pick your wish list.
Okay. There also may be ones that don't cost any money, that are internal and procedural. So for those,
Right.
I don't know how you want to handle that, half a sticker, I don't know.
Okay, well, why don't we use the R, whatever this color is, R, for those things that don't involve money but they do involve staff resource, so.
Right, staff time and
we're saying
resources.
These are priorities for, yeah.
Okay, but wait, hold on one second, because if you do that, then your dots are not gonna match. Because if what you're trying to do is give each of the commission one dot in green, one dot in yellow, and one dot in orange, so that they can, figure out in order, 1, 2, and 3, prioritize, right?
No,
No.
we're not prioritizing in an order. We're saying all the stuff we want to put the money towards.
Everybody gets a sheet,
Okay,
so you get 8 dots. Pick 8 things that
that are money related.
are money related, that you're
Okay.
supportive of,
And then the yellow's what?
whatever everyone else decides.
The wish list, not the absolutes. The green is absolutely, we want to see this in our next fiscal year, and the yellow is, this is the wish list, not a necessary.
Provided it's fiscally possible.
Okay, so yellow, is wish list.
Green is must list.
Green is money. And
Must. What we want, it's our first priority.
first priority.
Okay.
And what is orange?
Things that may not necessarily involve money outlay, but resource,
Okay.
staff resource.
Staff, things we support for the internal administration to do, but not necessarily, we don't necessarily see immediate money towards it. He may come back and say, you guys are wrong, you want me to do X, Y, and Z, and it costs you $15,000, I don't know
Right.
what you were thinking.
Right.
Because he may very well come back and say to us, you know what, you want me to do X, Y, and Z, are you crazy? I need another person.
And he may come back, and the manager may come back and say, well, you wanted to do these 3 things internally, operationally, we can handle that, even though you didn't pick them. But I think it's a good idea, and we'll move in that direction. He could do that too.
And since Commissioner Bilt is not here, and you've been so kind as to draw everything out, maybe what we can do is give him that opportunity at a later time to do. No, you can't split that.
Go place your dots.
Stretch for a minute, sir.
Careful,
Oh.
you're taking your,
We're sticking. We're sticking. What do we want more? Can we cut it in half? Huh? Can we cut it in half?
At some point, we run out of people. So good to see you. How do you feel?
So I'm gonna cheat, and I already know stuff, I'm gonna cheat because I already know the stuff we're going to do, so I'm not putting yours back.
Monthly, quarterly. Building department.
About the solicitors that we frown upon, if someone comes to your door, and you check your residence, then the police can't do anything. So there's educational thinking about solicitors.
You know what, we should cross out here because we're gonna get the same.
You can't cheat. You can't cheat. I'm gonna put a green where no one else puts green.
However you want to put it.
A lot of them are. I mean, most everyone needs to know that we have a permit. Filled out at the police station to be able to solicit.